across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Happy heatwave, happy Friday. I hope you've got a lot planned up for this amazing weekend because it's going to be hot yet again. And let's not complain. Wow, I don't really know where to begin this morning because late yesterday I got a message from a friend of mine saying somebody that you know very well has passed away. And there was a lot of, not secrecy, a lot of privacy around the death. And then I found out at about 7 o'clock yesterday that my former colleague in the European Parliament, the infamous Ann Widdecombe, sadly, is no longer with us. And wow, I mean, she's such a big presence. She was such a big presence. It's quite difficult to imagine events without Anne being there. And it's got me thinking a lot about channeling my own inner Anne, us all channeling our own inner Anne, because she had conviction, she had principle, she had faith both in God and in her version of politics. She had faith in her own beliefs and a tireless drive to see them realised. She was a character in politics, probably one of the greatest female politicians this country has ever and will ever see. Perhaps one of the greatest politicians, because it's not that easy being someone like Anne. It's not that easy, despite being 4'0", standing up for a mountain of beliefs, having huge amounts of courage and having the determination to constantly stand by your principles, not drift one way or the other way due to pressure, but to say, I know what I believe in, and I believe that I'm right. And if I believe that I'm right and that these things are important, they are worth fighting for, whatever the opposition, whatever the criticism, whatever the ridicule. There was an amazing speech she made talking about nobody has the right to ask to be protected from offence. It's a consequence of being a human being. And when she expressed her opinions, particularly those rooted in her firmly held religious faith, she didn't care if people called her outmoded, outdated, old-fashioned, a bigot, a homophobe, because she said no. I want people to live freely and do what they like. But in my religion, this is the fundamental principle. And I look at what we've got today. That thing that's about to be anointed as our Prime Minister, who I don't think has a single political conviction, not a whiff of ideology, not a belief in his bones. It's just there for the ride. Celebrity for media people, mediocre people. Anne wasn't mediocre, Anne was exceptional. And she was tough. She gave you unsolicited advice. There were opinions that you didn't ask for that you got anyway. But she fundamentally loved this country, loved humans of all kinds, and wanted to see the betterment for everybody. And she would ride the waves. She'd take the rough with the smooth. And because of that fortitude, because of the metal in that woman's veins, she became a national treasure. She allowed herself to be dragged around in Strictly Come Dancing, while all the lovies laughed at her. Louis Theroux poking about in her private life. Why aren't you married? Why don't you have children when you stand up for the family unit so much? She didn't care. She would allow herself to be scrutinised. She'd allow herself to be mocked, derided, chastised, because she had a spine. Unlike all these venal, vainglorious, flippy-floppy, willy-nilly, do they like me? What's the polling? Has my tweet gone viral? Fake news politicians we have today. We have lost a true veteran who understood fully what it meant to be a public servant, what it meant to represent your constituency, what it meant to stand up for your vision and do everything to deliver it. And if only we'd had parliaments of Ann Widdecombe's for successive years, our country would not be the burning dumpster fire it is today, because it wouldn't have happened under her watch. So let us all, when we look back at Ann, the mischief, the humour, the toughness and the conviction, think we can all have a little bit of that. Because if you believe it, and you believe it to be right, and it is worth fighting for, then don't sit on your hands and don't sit on the fence. Whether you're 4'1" or 6'7", be a warrior. Right, let us remind ourselves now of a little bit of Ann being that warrior in the European Parliament.
17.4 million people in the biggest democratic turnout in British history voted to leave. We ended up in the European elections as the single biggest party in this parliament. Why? Why did Boris Johnson get such a massive majority in the last election? Because his basic promise was get Brexit done.
My gosh, I'm actually wearing a lanyard in the background. I never thought I'd worn one of those in my life. Anyway, there she was. I can give you lots of anecdotes. Mind the quip, I'm sure I'll pepper the show with some of my own memories of being privileged enough to work with and learn a lot from the great woman herself. But first of all, let's speak to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, I know it's one of those cliches that people throw out when we mourn the loss of somebody. Well, there's no one like her. Wasn't she so unique? But she was. I mean, that is an understatement.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I didn't work alongside her, but I had a good number of dealings with her, usually in broadcast studios. One of a kind, Alex, forthright, principled, wonderfully eccentric as well, which I don't mind saying about her. We need more eccentricity as well, but that was part of the sort of, didn't really give two hoots what was said about her being ribbed, all of the rest of it. And, yeah, they broke the mould, didn't they, when they created Ann Widdecombe. And listen, I was listening to you earlier, Alex, saying, you know, we needed a kind of parliament full of Ann Widdecombe's, or at least individual, outspoken, principled people, and I agree with that. My real worry now is I think a putative young Ann Widdecombe would not be able to get through all the selection processes and the sort of have you ever said anything that might have offended anyone ever type checks that political parties now impose. So the parties themselves, I think, back in the day, would have seen Ann Widdecombe for what she was, a principled woman of the right who could articulate a case with passion, energy and intelligence. But nowadays, I think you would get a big red mark against you on any sort of selection process and protocol. So we've squeezed out these sort of people. Not that there are many people like Ann Widdecombe, but we've squeezed them out of our politics, and we need more, not fewer of them.
No, I fully agree. And, you know, what's interesting is people sort of always portrayed Ann as a sort of battle axe, particularly when it came to standing up for small c conservative social values. But she was the Be Kind movement. You know, everyone painted her as some sort of, you know, homophobic, old, you know, bigot. But actually she was the one who really understood social issues, understood individual agency, but stood up for moral decency rather than throwing about vacuous hashtags, be kind, which very often means tolerate intolerance and actually make the world a worse place. She could see what would make the world better. She could see that strict principles and everybody coming together under the same moral glue, the same social fibre was utterly important for a society. And so she fought for it, and she fought for it in the face of people who, quite frankly, sneered at her, criticised her. Do you know, I was listening to the Today programme this morning. Typical blimmin' BBC. The one bit of audio they play wasn't of Anne making a barnstorming speech as we have just done. No, it was the haughty, unpleasant voice of Craig Revel-Horwood as a judge on Strictly Come Dancing, frankly, taking the mick out of her. And I thought, dear Lord, the woman has just passed away, and they couldn't help have a little dig. But you know what? Anne would be looking down and going, go on then, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough, because there was nothing that rattled her, nothing.
Yeah, that's right. And on this sort of, she had some, firm, sometimes controversial opinions. I was usually on her side in political debates, but sometimes against her. She had very, very staunch social conservative views. I'm a much more libertarian, and we would sometimes clash a little over that. But the key thing is, I can't remember her in her entire career ever saying an unkind personal word about somebody. She might destroy you in open combat over in a debate or over a dispatch box, but she was never cruel or unpleasant or unkind to the people that she disagreed with. So yeah, I think we've got all of this be kind stuff completely the wrong way round. It's virtue signalling always on the left. From what I could tell, I didn't know her enormously well. She was a very kind woman, I know she had this image of being the battle axe, but that's simply because she was fearsome, not because she was unpleasant at all. She was always, I think, delightful, respectful, and frankly, great fun to debate against.
Right,
well.
she said exactly what she thought, but she thought before she spoke as well.
Yeah.
And that is something that we don't get a lot of. I mean, a lot of the vacuous platitudes that come out of politicians today, you can tell they're lying through their teeth, gaslighting, and their attitudes don't stand up for anything. They're completely vacuous. Although one thing Anne would often do is offer unsolicited advice on your love life and your clothes.
I can well imagine. Yeah, probably only to women, I think, Alex. Probably only to women, right?
She loved men. She was very much one of the lads, and I think she saw, especially younger women, she saw them as a bit silly, as a bit flippant at times. And I remember once I was wearing some white shoes, and she just sort of gave me a look up and down from her sort of diminutive stature, and just went, "You look like an Essex tart." I loved her for stuff like that. It was hilarious. No, I mean, like I said, do you know, one thing that sticks out at me is, when you look back at the documentary when Louis Theroux went to live with her and the way that the media portrayed her, you can actually see they wouldn't have done that to a person who was of Muslim faith, of Hindu faith. They ridiculed her and she was a figure of fascination and mockery because she was a Christian.
Yes, no, that's right. That's right. And she was, out and proud about her views. And in terms, again, Alex, of comparing her to the kind of typical identikit modern-day politician, of course, the great advantage that Ann Widdecombe had, and unfortunately a vanishingly small number of modern-day politicians have, is if you know what your core principles are, if you know what your basic ideological framework is, it becomes quite easy to put forward an argument about any particular thing that might have come up on any particular day, because you're approaching every single policy issue, every controversy from a position of principle. The reason that so many modern-day politicians just come across as speaking word salad is, well, they are speaking word salad, but they don't have a thought-out, consistent framework of belief that they apply to each issue. So for them, each and every issue they come up is a discrete thing to be argued about. They want the line from high command. They don't know whether to lean this way or lean that way. They want to get the intonations bang on right. I mean, Andy Burnham is the personification of this, isn't he? That he thinks twice before saying nothing.
Yeah.
Ann Widdecombe was exactly the opposite. You would always... she always knew where she was coming from on any given topic. You could always guess where she was coming from on any particular topic, and that made her incredibly lucid, formidable, and, as I say, crystal clear in the way that she was able to put forward her arguments. So I raise a glass to her up in the high heavens, and I hope that the message we take from her life is that we need more politicians who approach things from an unbending, principled position, rather than just being blown around with the wind on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, well, let's stick with that theme and finish talking about the perils of a plasticine Prime Minister. Because that's what we've got, isn't it? They've ousted Starmer. We're living a communist coup in real time. Burnham's coming in. Evidently, he's got 322 colleagues nominating him, making it almost numerically impossible for anybody else to be any sort of rival in this race. I mean, it was, you know, game, set and match of fait accompli from the beginning, before the by-election in Makerfield even happened. And what is scaring me is we're already seeing the pack of jackals who want to drag this country even further into the mire, pushing Burnham around, and huge red lights blinking on the dashboard as he's decided to come out and say that the approach to Israel, the approach to Gaza has been wrong, parroting the Hamas propaganda, talking about sanctioning Israel, going further than Starmer ever did on this subject. When we are still in the grip of huge conflict in the Middle East, he's trying to appease the Islamist vote. Very clear he wants that voting bloc back. That fills me with terror.
Yes, and I'm afraid, Alex, I think this will be the first of many bad missteps, or indeed leaps to the left, by our new Prime Minister, because I think for all of his ideological weakness, he's a canny campaigner, and he will just be thinking in terms of how do I keep my coalition together. So I share your reading on that he's read the room. He thinks that most of his fellow travellers are very hostile to Israel. He drops a few hints and throws a little bit of red meat in that direction. And if that's his approach to something as sensitive as the Middle East, God only knows where we're going to end up on taxation and welfare and regulation and policing and God knows what else. So I'm expecting Andy Burnham's honeymoon to be even shorter than Keir Starmer's. Reality is going to hit him hard and fast. And although he has done, in communications terms and in terms of winning over the Labour Party, a good job of being a kind of smiley, happy sort of chap who appeals to that segment of the electorate, there are some big fundamental problems in Britain. And at the moment, even though we are mere days away from him entering number 10 Downing Street, he hasn't given any coherent answer or plan about how he's going to tackle any of them. So I fear, not just on the Israel issue, but on a whole swathe of others, we're going to get a drift to the left on virtually every single topic. And that's going to mean that our plight in Britain, which is already pretty grim, I suspect under the Burnham premiership, is going to get measurably worse. Sad state of affairs.
Sad state of affairs indeed. Mark, thank you ever so much for your candour. Let's do some messages now, because a lot of people have messaged in about Anne, and I'd love to pay tribute to her. She's such an important person in our political life. I was a big fan of Anne. I'm very upset to hear of her passing. We desperately need people like her in politics. What a sad loss of the dear Ann Widdecombe. They broke the mould when they made her. God rest her. We've lost a giant. The political class today aren't fit to lace her shoes. A conviction politician. R.I.P. Anne. The world is a lesser place without you. Jason in Keswick. Good morning, Alex. What a massive shock to learn of the passing of Ann Widdecombe. I had so much respect for that lady, her politics and her genuine faith. I can't tell you how much I'll miss her. Brad in Cambridge. What a massive shock to learn of the passing of Ann Widdecombe. I had so much respect for that lady, her politics and her genuine faith. I never saw Ann Widdecombe compromise her Christian faith, whether she was debating in Parliament in the Big Brother house or dancing around on Strictly. R.I.P. Anne. And just before we go to break, I want to share a naughty anecdote with you about Anne. It's 20 past 10 in the morning, so I will frame it in Ofcom-friendly terms. But when we were all MEPs in the European Parliament and we would have to go to plenary, which was once a month in Strasbourg, the one time that the fake news parliament of the EU sits in eastern France, in Alsace, we used to have a habit of, on the Tuesday evening, all of the MEPs and their staff would have dinner together in a little town restaurant just on the outskirts of the city. We had the whole place to ourselves. We'd meet, we'd drink, we would have dinner, we'd discuss politics, strategy, voting lists. But we were comrades in arms, all of us, all 29 elected MEPs, always together every Tuesday. The biggest, happiest, most solid family. You would not believe it if only more political parties were like that. Anyway, I remember the Christmas edition of our monthly dinner. And more people were invited. People brought their spouses, some brought their kids, even more staff, not just our APAs, our authorised parliamentary assistants, but all of our staff coming in from the UK. We had a grand old affair, and everyone had done a Secret Santa. And some of the younger members of staff obviously thought that this was a great opportunity for hijinks, and some of the purchases that people unwrapped on the night were, well, comical, let's say. I have enduring visions of Nigel Farage dancing with a chair and James Glancy, former SAS commando, going on the floor on his stomach with a pea shooter, attacking people under the tables, a glass being smashed all over my dad somehow. But my lasting memory from that occasion was someone had bought somebody, as part of the Secret Santa, let's say an adult toy. And in the melee, in the foray, this offending item flew over the restaurant and landed slap bang in Ann Widdecombe's fish supper. Oh, I don't know, you kind of waited for the headmistress reproach, the eye roll, the glare. Instead, there was a twinkle in her eye and a smile on her face, and everybody adored that moment. Anne, my darling Anne, thank you for everything. I'm going to miss you. Right, let's take a short break now. When we come back, I'm going to be walking you through some of the big headlines about lawless Britain. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, you must be living under a rock if you didn't realise that we're in the throes of a Football World Cup, and this has led, understandably, to jubilant street celebrations when teams storm their way to victory and make it through to the next round. But unfortunately for European countries with porous borders who have allowed a lot of feral foreigners into their lands, there have been what some might describe as utter scenes now in France, because France beats Morocco and there is a very large North African population, immigrant population, living in many of the banlieues of the big cities. There were riots. Were we spared? No, we weren't. Take a look at this. Last night in central London, a police officer has been hospitalised, injured because of clashes with rioting Moroccan fans. There they are. Look at them. On the streets, chasing down the police, throwing projectiles, carrying their flags, littering our pavements, spitting, shouting, acting, frankly, like creatures in some sort of wild savannah. I'm appalled. How dare you? This isn't your country. This is not your house to trash. You don't turn up somewhere as a visitor, watch a football match, and then do that. Trash the joint, smash things up, litter the streets, attack the police, act like rampaging rabble-rousers. And do you know what I think needs to happen to these utter scumbags who think they can come to Britain and get away with this stuff because they got away with their pro-Palestine marches, didn't they? They get away with whatever they want because, oh, my goodness, if you tell them they shouldn't behave as they're behaving, you're clearly some sort of xenophobic, racist Islamophobe. I'll give you what not. If I went to Marrakesh and I decided to storm the souks with a cross of St. George and harass the police, I would get beaten to a pulp by their law and justice. I'd be handcuffed, dragged into a dingy cell, probably made to wait in solitary confinement, surrounded by rats with nothing but a glass of stale water and some tepid gruel to keep me company, and then very quickly put on an aeroplane, sent home and banned from ever going back. So that is what needs to happen to these people. You do not come to a host nation. You do not think you can rampage the streets and run the joint as if you're kings of the world. You do not get to act so atrociously, risking the lives of our law enforcement, smashing up properties, vandalising cars, littering the place, turning it into a dumpster fire. How dare you? Each and every one of those so-called football fans, those feral foreign miscreants, needs to be identified. Their visas need to be revoked. I don't care if it's a work visa, a student visa, I don't care what you do, what your profession, send them all home. Because unless we turn around and say we're not going to tolerate this, what message are we sending to them? Come over here, do what you like, run riot. Break everything apart. You can get away with whatever you like because you're beatified. You're held higher than the domestic population. You are invincible. Unless we see mass arrests and mass deportations from incidents like this, we are sending a message to the world. Not only are we a soft touch, oh no, we're a squatter's house. Come here, right on the wall in your faeces. Do what you like. Because we don't care, we got no pride, we've got no dignity, we don't even have our own home address anymore because we're taken over by people like that. So, dear Mr Burnham, as you're about to be newly anointed, our Prime Minister without a mandate, how about you show us that you're serious about law and order? How about you show us that you're serious about societal cohesion? How about you identify these yobbos and send them back from whence they came? Because unless a country can turn round and tear up someone's visa, send them home and say, not under our watch, this will happen and it will get worse. Let's speak now to Mark Fairhurst, who's a former national chairman of the Prison Officers Association. I mean, dear Lord, Mark, when it comes to, you know, prison spaces and the sort of people I'd like to chuck in prison, there's hardly a chance that we're going to see any of those marauding so-called football fans from last night enter one of our institutions.
Well, you would hope that the government, after that incident, would enact swift justice. They seem to be keen on swift justice. And at this moment in time, we've got plenty of space in our prisons to accommodate people who riot because of a result in a football match. And what this does highlight to me, Alex, is that the police need more protection. If you look at other jurisdictions within Europe, they would have used rubber bullets, CS gas and water cannon. Why don't our police have such resources at hand to deal with such violence?
I agree, and, you know, until we go top to bottom and actually send these people back from whence they came and send a clear message that doing things like this will see you thrown out of the country, it's only going to make the job of law enforcement even harder. Let's talk now about this really disturbing story, which is that almost 9,000 people in England and Wales who should be wearing a tag, an ankle tag, for security reasons because they're probably violent offenders, prisoners released from jail early who need to be constantly monitored, apparently don't have one. That's according to the National Audit Office. What is going on here?
Yeah, this is not the first time that the company responsible for tagging offenders when they're released early, Serco, it's not the first time they've let the government down and let the public down. The last time we had a whole host of early releases, they were short of ankle tags and people weren't getting tagged for weeks and months. They should be tagged within 24 hours of their release. They failed yet again. So what we need to do is remove the contract for them, bring it back in-house and let prison officers and probation officers employ additional staff. to do it for us. And it makes sense to me that if the prison service were responsible for tagging people before they released, then none of them would be short of an ankle tag. But as I say, it's not the first time it's happened, and they need to be held to account yet again, because quite clearly, if your licence conditions say you should be on a GPS tag or a sobriety tag and you haven't got one, you are a severe risk to the public.
Yes.
And I feel sorry for the probation service who have to supervise these offenders upon release. If they haven't got an ankle tag on, how do we know what to do and where they are?
I think about poor women, and there's one girl that I know who has suffered very recently at the hands of an extremely violent man who was held in custody for 2 weeks and has been released supposedly of an ankle tag and forbidden from going anywhere near where she lives. And I think about how she lives in terror, and the idea that if his tag wasn't working and on his ankle, how her life is hugely diminished every waking moment, fearful that he could turn up at the door. This is utterly appalling, a massive abdication of duty, a failure of law enforcement, and I hope that heads roll. Listen, in a statement, the Ministry of Justice has said the government inherited a failing tagging system with record backlogs. As this report shows, we've worked hard to fix this, with install rates up by nearly 50% since 2024. This, in addition to our recent record £700 million investment in probation, recruiting 2,300 trainee probation officers over the last 2 years and recruiting a further 1,300 this year, making sure the probation service has the resource it needs to keep dangerous offenders under closer surveillance than ever before. Well, nice warm words there, but it's not really going to be of much comfort to people who, particularly people who have been, let's say, for instance, victims of domestic abuse, who are not going to be sleeping well tonight. Now, talking about making sure people are sleeping well, I suppose we better make sure all of our inmates are having a lovely old time in prison, lest they hear hurty words or feel ostracised or discriminated against. And here we go, the latest in Clown Britain. A prison invited a drag artist to entertain sex offenders attending an LGBT sports day. There's a walkway outside a segregation unit. This was at HMP Moorland near Doncaster. Was covered in plastic sheets covering, you know, LGBTQ flags for the events. There was a sports day organised by jail bosses to recognise diversity within the prison. I mean, dear Lord, when will it end? Sex offenders and LGBT inmates were among those invited to the sports day. Half the prisoners at Category C Training and Resettlement Prison have been jailed for sex offences. So these are sexed up, fetishised people who don't know how to keep their mitts to themselves or keep it in their pants, so much so that they've been locked up. And I don't know, let's titillate them by getting a hypersexualised act from a man dressed in drag to go and dance around on a load of rainbows. What on earth is this? Does this happen at a lot of prisons?
That's the first time I've heard of something like that going on. We have sports days, which is all fine because it helps well-being and it eases tension in a jail, and I haven't got a problem with a sports day. But as National Chair of the POA, we're looking into this story ourselves to see if it's accurate. If it is accurate, who's made the decision to allow this? Because let's be honest, it doesn't aid rehabilitation. It provides no value whatsoever. And more importantly, it just shows how out of touch the leaders within our prisons really are. When it comes to victims of crime, what the hell must victims of crime think about this story? Imagine being a victim of a sexual offence and you know your perpetrator serving a sentence at Moorland has been entertained by a drag queen. It's absolutely ridiculous. It shows you that the leaders within this service don't live in the same world as me. And I can assure you, as a trade union representing the frontline staff who have no choice but to supervise these activities because they're forced to by their leaders, we are looking into this and there will be awkward questions asked.
Good one. Thank you so much, Mark Fairhurst. A real honour to have you on the programme today. Former National Chairman of the National Prisoners Association. What a ridiculous situation when we're not just appeasing but feeding the sexual fetishes of people who are locked up for not being able to control them. Utterly disgusting. Right, what are your thoughts on everything we've discussed today? Because there's a heck of a lot to talk about, isn't there? I want to know what you think about, well, all the stories we've talked about and those we haven't yet covered, even. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you want to have a chit-chat with me, you can phone up now, register your interest, leave your number, and we will give you a call back when we're taking calls. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you text. We have have a little bit of breaking news for you just before we go into the advert break, which is detectives investigating Andrew Mountbatten Windsor are preparing to travel to the United States to interview the family of his accuser, Virginia Giuffre. That's according to the Times newspaper. So that story looks like it's going to be getting its second legs. Right, when we come back, we're going to be sticking with domestic politics, talking about the forthcoming Clacton by-election and the forthcoming Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, since the last time I was on air hanging out with you guys, a lot has happened, hasn't it? And I've been itching to come and talk about it. You can imagine, can't you? Again, more headlines today with people probing the state of Reform's finances. A police investigation is now being conducted into Reform donations coming from the mother of George Cottrell, who served time in prison over in America for money laundering charges. Although, worth pointing out that he got released early for cooperating with the police and showing them quite how it's done. Not only that, it's not like this was a great secret. The man launched a book about how to launder money to all the great and the good from the media establishment at Raffles. And so, well, seems a little bit archaeological, let us say, and rather convenient to be digging around right now. But there you are. Fresh doubts have apparently been raised over Nigel Farage's claim that he didn't have to declare the £5 million gift from the cryptocurrency billionaire, Christopher Harbour. At the same time, we learn that Dale Vince is offering to fund Count Binface in what is turning out to be a farcical battle over in Clacton. And to top it all off, we've got a new Prime Minister in waiting. Lord knows what he's going to do. Lord knows why he thinks he can just waltz on in to number 10 and suddenly start switching things up when nobody voted for him as Prime Minister. But there we are. That is the state of Clown Britain. But let's get a Labour point of view on everything going on at the moment. We're joined by Sebastian Salek, former Labour councillor and political strategist. Great to have you back on the programme, Sebastian. Let us begin with Clacton, shall we? Because what is your opinion on the fact that Rachel Reeves has moved the writ for there to be a by-election, says, yep, that's fine, we're going to allow that seat to be contested, but then all the parties saying we're not going to put anybody up for it. And this is coming in the wake of, you know, the games, the musical chairs that they've been playing in Makerfield.
Well, anyone's entitled to call a by-election, anyone's entitled to resign. But what Nigel Farage has been so good at over the years is owning the frame, holding the frame, and be able to set the way we discuss things. You think about small boats, for example. He's one of the first people to talk about that in, what was it, 2018, 2019, and now it's something that lots of people care about. This is a rare example of a time where he's tried to set the frame. He said, look, guys, if I win this by-election, then I'm absolved, he's essentially said. And the rest of the political community has said, no, we're not going to entertain that. We're not going to stand candidates. And that's how we find ourselves in this bizarre situation where it's Farage versus Binface.
But it's not really a good look, is it? I mean, the way that I see it, if an MP stands down for whatever reason, it triggers a democratic plebiscite. I think it's rather appalling for other parties to go, well, who cares about democracy? We're not going to allow the constituents of Clacton to have a genuine battle of political ideas. Is that not against the spirit of democracy?
Well, no, just as it wasn't against the spirit of democracy in 2019 when Brexit Party candidates stood aside for the Tories. You can't force a party to put up a candidate in an election. It's for anybody who wants to and meets the rules to do that. And sometimes parties choose not to. Most parties didn't field a candidate in every constituency in the last election. So you just have to let people throw their hat in the ring, and that is the field of candidates you have before you.
Let's talk now about more and more attacks on reform, about finances. Do you think that the people who are really pushing this agenda run the risk of it actually very much starting to look like a witch hunt? The more stories, the more headlines, the more targets, the more leaks, the more disclosures, that actually it ends up having the opposite effect. A bit like when there was a mugshot of Trump having been arrested, which actually concretised support for him. Do you think they risk when they're pursuing all of these allegations and accusations and leaking it to the press that an investigation's taking place, that actually the reverse of what they hope to happen might come to pass?
Yeah, look, I think you make a fair point, because when you're dealing with someone like Farage, he's always going to try and concoct this idea that it's him versus the establishment. It's how he's framed that by-election. And certainly if he comes under more fire about his finances, it's how he's going to frame that as well. But just like everybody else in politics, he has to follow the rules. He's not exempt from that. You could make the same argument about the whole Mandelson saga, which was deeply shameful and deeply damaging for the Labour Party. But again, rules are rules and they must be followed. So I'd like to see the investigation carried out fairly, and I'd like to see any consequences play out as well.
Well, let's put this in our pipe and smoke it, shall we? Which is that Dale Vince now wants to bankroll Count Binvase's fight against Farage, an Oxbridge-educated comedian who does bits of work for the BBC. I find it quite ridiculous and farcical and not exactly becoming and edifying to see all of these various politicians chortling this, because I think it's frankly taking the monkeys out of our democracy and out of voters. But this is an important point, OK? Dale Vince now wants to bankroll Binface. Well, Dale Vince has previously donated more than £5 million to Labour. Oh, look, it's that figure again, £5 million. And paid millions to Sadiq Khan. And then guess what happened as a result? That's right. His Ecotricity company has earned more than £3.5 million in government contracts. That, to me, is disturbing. Why aren't we talking about that £5 million? Why are we all being led to focus on a £5 million that just went to Nigel Farage for security? This is a conflict of interest. This appears, at least on the surface, to mine eyes, to be essentially corruption at the extremely highest level.
Well, the big difference, of course, is that £5 million from Dale Vince was declared. It followed the rules. And if you're angry about that, you should be even angrier about the money that's gone into Nigel Farage's personal pocket. And we've then seen a crypto bill published. We've seen reform campaigning to lower taxes on crypto. And remember where that money came from. A crypto
This man got £3.5 million in contracts. £3.5 million.
£5 million is a good investment for Christopher Harbour. If he gets
No. Let's talk about Dale Vince. Let's talk about Dale Vince. Gave £5 million, got £3.5 million back in government contracts. Does that not look like a cosy cartel at the top of the left wing of politics?
Well, answer me
Shouldn't
this.
voters ask questions?
What do you think Christopher Harbour wants?
No, we're talking about Dale Vince. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm making the comparison.
No, I'm asking you, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
I'm telling you that those donations weren't made. They were declared legally. And then you have to ask yourself, why do people donate? Some people want something for their money. Christopher Harbour wants something for his money. And I think it's very, very curious that we're not interrogating that further when it's plain for all to see.
Oh, we are. I think everybody's interrogating the Christopher Harbour donation. I hear nothing but the interrogation of the Christopher Harbour donation. It's been dominating headlines now for a couple of weeks. What isn't dominating headlines is this cosy little club at the top. This is taxpayers' money going back to that man.
Well, the definition of news is that it's new, and the allegations and the revelations here are new, which is why they're in the news. It's just slightly strange that you're trying to pivot this away and talk about.
That's not slightly strange. I think it'd be pretty hypocritical if we didn't also point out stories like this. And actually, quite frankly, the talk of George Cottrell and his relationship with Nigel Farage isn't new at all. That is archaeologically dug up to add sort of more weight to the impetus right now. And I'm sick to death. I'm sick to death of the hypocrisy democracy of the political elite. I'm happy to watch anybody hung, drawn and quartered and cross-examined for impropriety, but I'm afraid that rule has to fit everybody. That rule has to fit sneering little Ed Davey for taking £275,000 of consultancy money from the lawyers defending the post office, having been post offices minister during the Horizon scandal. It has to accord to Dale Vince. It has to accord to the clients list that Lord Hermer and Sir Keir Starmer had.
Those donations were declared legally. Farage's weren't. There's a very big and important difference there.
And you think the general public are more worried about the declaration, are you?
I don't know.
He wasn't a politician at the time that Nigel Farage received money.
People following parliamentary laws and following the law of the land, and I'd like to see whether that's the case on both counts.
Well, good. That I agree with. I think we have to have a level playing field. We can't have two-tierism in politics, although I think very much
Not at all, which is why we should be calling out undeclared donations.
Yeah, well, listen, let's talk now when it comes to two-tierism in politics. Oh, didn't they scream, didn't they cry out for a general election when the Conservative parties were the one faffing about playing musical chairs and parlour games rather than actually coming up with policy to help this nation? And then here we have it. We're going to have the auto-appointment of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister, a man who got 20,000 votes in Makerfield and now will apparently represent 70 million of us. That's a 0.03% slice of accountability. You'd need the blimmin' James Webb telescope to be able to spot that level of infinitesimally minute democracy. But we're beginning to learn the sort of direction of travel that our new leader may have, and it seems to me he wants to tear up the book when it comes to the treatment of Israel and go harder, further, darker and more dangerous than his predecessor.
I mean, that's such a bizarre framing, that 0.00 whatever you came up with.
0.03% of the population voted for Andy Burnham. Every Prime
Minister in modern times has been elected by a constituency and has then gone on to be chosen to be party leader by their party. That's just how electoral politics works. So you can't wheel that one out.
No. I'm sorry. You can. People voted for Starmer's Labour Party, not Burnham's vision of a Labour Party.
No.
It might not be the letter of the law, but it's the spirit of democracy.
We vote for our local MPs who then choose a leader.
Oh, but they all cried foul when the Conservatives kept changing leader. Why do they think that they are immune from such criticism?
Well, I warned against this. I didn't think it was the right thing to change our leader because I don't want us to fall into the same trap of the Tories. But now it's happened. I am hopeful. I'm enthusiastic. I want to see a man who can turn things around. And I think at least his political nous, given his decades in politics, and his communication skills, which you've already seen, are two things that Starmer didn't have. And that gives me a bit of hope that he can make a difference.
But what do you think about all of a sudden him turning around and saying that Starmer's approach to what's going on in the Middle East and Gaza isn't right? Isn't he just stirring the pot? Haven't we had enough of the pro-Pally marches and giving succor to people who don't share our particular political and cultural values?
No, look, I think that the Labour Party was slow, as Burnham said, to decry a lot of what happened in Gaza, which is objectively appalling behaviour from
Hamas, yeah.
Well, from Hamas, yes, and from the Israeli government subsequently. So it's a good chance. Now we've got a new leader to draw a line under that and reposition ourselves as a party that stands with the Palestinian people, but also supports the state of Israel. I think those two ideas can be held in the head concurrently.
What sort of Labour government are we now going to have? Because it seems to me all the warning signs are he's going to be dragged around, manipulated and pulled about by the earlobe by extreme leftists in the party. 80 Labour MPs have signed a private letter urging Andy Burnham to retreat on Shabana Mahmood's controversial, in inverted commas, immigration reforms. She was trying to do what the vast majority of the population think needs to be done to keep this country secure. And he seems to be potentially at risk of being cajoled by a hardened wing of backbenchers into throwing all of that into the proverbial dustbin of history.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Labour has a lot of factions and they want their own things and they're going to lobby the Prime Minister for those things. And it's up to the Prime Minister whether he wants to relent and give them what they're asking for. I don't really see a massive lurch to the left on immigration, if I'm honest. That's a guess. I don't know. But I think Burnham sees where the country is on immigration, and Shabana Mahmood, I think, has largely been aligned with that. So I would expect to see more of the same and probably not giving in to that wing of the party.
I feel like somehow I'm the only person who's exercised by the fact that we're all saying, well, we don't know what Andy Burnham's going to do. We don't know where he stands on things like immigration, the biggest topic on the doorstep and the most pressing concern politically for this country in 2026. We just don't know. Why do I feel like I'm the only person who thinks that is a farcical state of affairs in a democracy?
Yeah, it's a very perverse situation we've ended up in, haven't we? Kind of the slow deposition of a Prime Minister and a successor coming in and not quite laying out his stall. We've had a few clues. We had that speech a couple of weeks ago, but we haven't had a full agenda from him. And I want that as badly as you do, because I want to know which direction my country is going in. I'm hopeful that it's going to be positive. It's going to be a good progressive flank of policies, but we have to wait and see. We haven't got it yet.
Indeed, we do. Sebastian, thank you so much. I always appreciate you coming on, especially when I'm sort of like, wound up and ready to explode. Can't be easy company. Oh, the wonderful Sebastian saying like that, former Labour councillor and political strategist. Let's do some of your messages, and after the break, we're going to be taking calls. These scenes in London show that this country is no longer under control. We're officially a third world country, and it's only going to get worse under Burnham. Get ready for the hate marches to return very soon, says Anthony in Liverpool. I think you are right. As a gay man, I'm appalled by the prison drag act story. These people are in prison for punishments, not free entertainment, says David in Cardiff. Oh, it made all the more piquant by the fact that half of them are sex offenders in the first place. Make it make sense. By-election bin face. Bin face actually represents the entire establishment, a human rubbish bin. And this is exactly how Nigel should frame it. I think so too. How much money has Dale Vince made from Miliband's Net Zero? A green energy tycoon wanting to fund bin face against Farage is very suspicious. Two-tier politics. Don't let them fool you into thinking that only one party has things that need to be probed, cross-analysed and examined. Seriously, there's a lot when you look closely at the others. Hi, Alex. I don't think Farage is against Binface. Farage's opponents are represented by Binface. It's going to be funded by the left money supply Dale Vince. Indeed it is. R.I.P. to a true legend in Ann Widdecombe. You don't have to agree with everything she said, but you always had to respect her conviction, and knowing her own mind is a true loss for our country, says Oliver in Somerset. OK, if you want to have a chat with me after the break or send your messages in, you can WhatsApp or call 0344 499 1000. If you'd rather send a text message, it's 8722. Write the word talk before you write your message. I'm back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello, hello. Now, of course, it is the World Cup for the UK, for England anyway, sort of, getting back up to full speed tomorrow with our next game. But meanwhile, here at Talk, we're going to be celebrating in style. We're going to be also giving you the chance to boost your bank balance by a fair amount of money, actually. £26,000. Rachel Reeves proof, completely tax-free. So the whole £26,000 will be in full in your bank, and you can do what you like with it. Here's how to enter the competition.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Oh, 26,000 fat ones. Good luck with that if you are entering that competition. I urge that you do. Right, let's do some calls. Let's do some messages. Let's speak firstly to Corrie, who's in North Leach. Good morning to you, Corrie.
Good morning.
Good morning. Right, what's on your mind?
I've been watching those disgraceful scenes at London with the Moroccan fans marauding, and the police, probably 24 of them, were absolutely well and truly outnumbered. And I'm just contrasting that with what happened with the Unite the Kingdom rally, when thousands of police were there and hundreds of thousands of very, very well-behaved Unite the Kingdom citizens.
Right, no, I agree entirely. That was a mass rally, hundreds of thousands of people were there. I went down and had a look at what was going on, and do you know what I saw? I saw policemen and women being treated with respect, being thanked for their service and their public duty, and I saw a lot of people attending that rally as the rally concluded, walking up and down the streets, picking up the litter. And
Absolutely
yet, what does this say? Do you reckon, right, if you and I went over to Morocco on holiday, which I do about once a year, I know Morocco well, it's one of my favourite countries on earth, and by and large, I do love the Moroccans. I've been treated extremely well by them in their own country, but I wouldn't think at all, I wouldn't even, you know, bear thinking about acting in that manner in Marrakesh. If I went over to a country like Morocco and started chasing the police and throwing projectiles and making a noise and trashing the joint, I'd probably get a pretty severe flogging.
You absolutely would. You absolutely would. And it just shows you the total difference between what we expect our citizens to do and what, you know, how they behave when they come to our country. It's just appalling.
Why do you think they do it? Because for me, this is a show of strength. This isn't about being upset about a football match. This is taking an opportunity to prove to us that they're invincible, to test our boundaries, to further solidify their presence here by saying, you can't touch us. What are you going to do about it? How dare they? I think every single one of them, every single one should have their visa revoked.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And until this government grows some bowlocks, then we're going to have this all the time, and there will be an uprising, and I don't know which side the uprising is going to be.
No, but this is the thing, and, you know, to see our police retreating over this, it brought me back in mind of the contrasting situations, the Blue Touch paper last summer that started the conflagration, which were those massive riots in Hare Hills, where the police just stood back in Leeds and let marauding foreigners set fire to fridges, police cars, buses, do what they like. They were untouchable. A week later, the native Brits said, we're going to now protest against the secrets the government's keeping from us with the Southport killer, and the Brits were lined up, frog-marched in front of judges, given unfair trials, and a great many of them locked up. It is sickening. And if you want to see riots this summer, then, right, do nothing about what happened on the streets of London last night with those Moroccan football fans. Because the message to everybody is, go on, have some fun, do what you like. You don't need to respect the place. After all, this is just some sort of, you know, island squat for anyone who wants to come here and abuse it. It sets a very dangerous precedent. Thank you so much to Corrie for your call. We're taking a short break now. Don't go anywhere. Back just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. 1 hour already under our belts. We're going to have to loosen that belt a little bit because there's a lot of meat to be consumed in the newspapers over the past week. And, well, I only get to come and hang out here Friday, Saturday and Sunday normally, so I store up all of my thoughts and my feelings and my opinions of things I've wanted to talk about. I've been ranting to myself in the bathroom mirror lately. I've been making my little soliloquies and diatribes in the shower because I haven't had your company. But now I get the opportunity to get it all off my chest. And guess what? That is a service we offer to you as well. Talk by name, talk by nature. If you want to get involved in the democratic process of communal catharsis, here is the housekeeping. You can call 03444 1000. It's your normal network rate, so it doesn't cost you anything more than making a call to anyone, anywhere as part of your package. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I especially love a voice note, can I just say, because it's a, you know, you really get a sense of somebody's tone when you hear them speak a message to you. And plus, we get to explore all the wonderful regional accents of this country. So if you'd like to leave me a voice note, the number for WhatsApp, 03444 1000. If you'd rather send a text, it's 87222. Write the word talk before you write your message. OK, got a buddy of mine in the studio now. Look at him, shiny and youthful and fresh, Mr. Kane Blackwell, who is helping to organise CPAC Great Britain. Now, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. I'm going to be there. I can't wait. So we're going to hear who's going to be there and what it's all about and why. But before we do that, rather like me, you have worked closely with Ann Widdecombe. Let's have a little listen to Nigel Farage paying tributes to her on This Year channel this morning.
She is the best-known female politician since Margaret Thatcher.
That's fair, yeah.
I don't think anybody else comes close. And the fact that she was sporting enough to do, you know, Strictly Come Dancing,
all of that,
a Big Brother,
yep.
And then she was touring the country doing one woman shows, an evening with Ann Widdecombe, where she talked to audiences, and she loved meeting people, and she was very gregarious, and you know, she'd work hard during the day. And I remember in Brussels at 6 o'clock. You know, so come on, Anne, what about it? Let's go out. And she'd have a couple of large whiskies and enjoy herself. Yeah. And she, as I say, she was a force of nature, quite a remarkable woman, and obviously a very sad sudden death. And we'll hear more about that as the days go on.
Ann Widdecombe, tell me, what have your been encounters with the great Widdy?
Well, when I worked at GB News as a producer, I used to speak to Anne every week, getting her thoughts about what she wanted to talk about. And I remember she always used to say to me, God, can we not talk about immigration again, Kane? And I was like, OK, let me try and find something else for you. But she was brilliant. And, you know, I worked with her then. I worked with her, obviously, when she came on Liz's show, the Liz Truss show, which I produce. But also, I knew her as well because she was very close to Sir David Amess and his family. And I went to Sir David's statue unveiling in his constituency, and we went back to Lady Amos's house, and myself, Anne, Andrew Rosendale and Priti Patel, actually, we were all chatting, reminiscing about when times that we'd been with David, and she was a really strong support for the Amos family. But she was just a brilliant person. I always thought, when I first met her, I thought she was going to be quite scary and quite standoffish.
Did you not find her scary?
I mean, a little bit, but actually...
I was slightly terrified of her.
I think you are because of who she is and what she stood for and everything. But she was actually one of the sweetest, nicest people as well, because she actually cared about people.
She did. She really did. She always wanted to know about people's, not private lives in an intrusive way, but she wanted to ask about, how's your family? How's your husband? Have you not got a husband yet, Alex? And she was, you know, she was absolutely one of a kind. And I was talking earlier with Mark Littlewood from Popular Conservatism, and You know, I was saying that and he made the very important point that someone like Anne probably wouldn't pass vetting processes. They probably wouldn't be allowed to be a candidate because they have conviction, because they have belief, because they stand up for what they believe in. But also the one thing, despite the fact that she left the Conservatives and came to the Brexit Party, then Reform, she was loyal to a fault. But loyal to principle more than anything. And that is something I think is so lacking now. We see this silly party politics of musical chairs, change the leader, party comes first. Let's spend more time and energy attacking the opposition rather than being productive about producing policy to save the country. We live in a world of sort of vacuous, spiteful, nasty Venus politicking when we actually need grown-up politics. And she was all about the grown-up politics.
She was indeed. She was a real conviction politician in an age where that was just sort of unheard of. And I think for many people, you know, in my part of the world, in Kent, she was a Kent MP. You know, she was very much loved by the people of Kent as well, and she did a lot in Kent, as well as where she lived in Exmoor and Dartmouth. And, you know, she was a really great person, but I think more so than anything, she was someone who cared about principles more than policies, but she also understood the challenges that this country faced. Even 2 days ago, she was talking about, on this programme actually, she was talking about how the establishment is real, that there is an establishment, that there are these things that are happening that people don't realise, and she got it, and she fought for it every single day.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the establishment is trying to stitch it up. It is this, look, people are going to think I'm being awfully biased saying this, but I don't think I am, because when all the political parties boycott an election, they wanted Farage to face a by-election, they were rubbing their hands together with glee at the idea that they can essentially instigate all of these investigations, and having been in politics a long time, I know how it works. I could phone up someone right now, I could phone up the police right now and be like, I want to report, you know, whoever it may be, Rachel Reeves, to the police for serious fraud. Then what I can do, and I'll say, this is what happened, and then they would have to open an investigation. Then I can phone the newspapers and say, Rachel Reeves is being investigated for serious fraud. The newspapers then phone the police to do a fact check. Is she being investigated? Or the police would have had to open up an investigation. And there you go, you have the headline. That is how it works. And it saddens me to see them all sitting there smugly thinking that they've won something because it's Farage versus Binface. They're chortling with delight, and they don't realise how they're coming across as mean girls in the playground, how actually they're not laughing at Farage, they're laughing at us.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think they have once again underestimated the strength of feeling of the British people, and they always want to sort of distance themselves. We're not establishment, or we're not this, and we're not trying to be like these guys. We're trying to distance ourselves from the past, particularly the Conservative Party is doing that. But actually, what they've just proven is that they don't want to be distance from the establishment. They are literally still doing the same thing.
They're laughing at us, they're sneering at us, they're being snide, they think we're thick, we're stupid, we shouldn't be listened to. Ha ha ha, aren't we all so clever? On our dinner party. Oh, look, Binface, you can come sit by me on the green benches. Here's a profile of Binface. Will Binface be allowed to wear his bin in Parliament? Shut up! This is the mother of parliamentary democracy. How dare you turn it into a risible farce? Whatever one might think of Farage calling a by-election, whether it was right or wrong, they blimmin' wanted him to face it. And he said, fine, I'll do it under my terms and conditions. And they've told him, we're not going to fight that by-election, but we will actually cause 2 by-elections and major disruption because we want to change our party leader. They don't realise how disgustingly elitist they look, how anti-democratic they're coming across.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they fail to understand, is that their lack of self-awareness is going to be their undoing. And it already is. It already has happened. And they still can't realise. But the problem is the establishment is complacent. They believe that at some point the people will just forget, they'll have short memories, and everything will just go back to normal. We can rest our feet up and carry on the way we are. And that's the problem that what they haven't realised is people have woken up. People are still waking up, and they're still people are realising now that things have to change. And if we keep doing the same things over and over again, we're going to get the same results. So we actually have to change the system, change the way we do politics in this country once and for all, because if we don't, nothing will change.
We're done for, basically. Let's talk now about, you said that voters having short memories. Well, Kemi Badenoch's come out and basically said, I'm Reform UK, hasn't she? Let's be fair. She has said she's rejecting former Conservative MPs as candidates. They are planning for a snap election, aren't they? And saying that anybody who doesn't want to scrap the net zero targets or leave the ECHR won't be allowed to stand. When she first came in as leader, she couldn't decide herself if she wanted to do those things. She's like, oh, I'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to announce policy here. She don't believe in anything apart from blimmin' the culture wars. And here she is talking tough. Oh, the Tories are now going to get rid of the ECHR, scrap net zero. You had 15 years and you didn't. Does she really think voters are going to buy this? And look at the Conservative Party, which seems to have abandoned all of its branding. I barely see anything coming out of CCHQ. It's all Team Kemi, like she's some sort of Brazilian footballer. Do you think people are buying this? It does seem to be having some effect, I think. I think there are a lot of people, you know, the sort of twin effort of making Nigel Farage look like a crook and making Kemi Badenoch look like Nigel Farage. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending what political party that you tend to wish to support, it does. These strategies do have an effect.
Yeah, of course they do, because at the end of the day, it's easy to say things now. But the problem is, what people do have to understand is you have to look back at history. You have to learn from history. And if someone says one thing one time, like, we're going to leave the ECHR, or we're going to reduce legal migration, and we're going to stop the boats, and it doesn't happen, don't be surprised when they say they're going to do something next time, and then they don't do it again, because that is a pattern. We have to look at patterns. And, you know, look, obviously I'm coming here on behalf of CPAC, but personally, you know, I'm a full paid-up member of Reform UK. I used to be a Conservative. I stood in the last general election as a Conservative in East London. And, you know, in my home seat of Sittingbourne and Sheppey, I wasn't even allowed to be put to the membership because, as I was told by someone in CCHQ, you're a bit too right-wing.
They told you that, did they?
Yeah. Someone told me that my associations with GB News and the fact that I was pushing for more democracy within the party and that I had more right-wing views wasn't quite what they were looking for. And that is the problem with the Conservative Party, is it's institutionally woke. It's institutionally woke.
Wow. But talking about, you are now a fully paid-up Reform member.
Yeah.
Are you worried, are you perturbed about this sort of huge inundation of stories about finances, things not being declared properly, things being passed to the National Crime Agency for potential risks of money laundering? I mean, the headlines aren't a pretty sight.
No, they're not a pretty sight, but the point is that this is all in the playbook. We've got to look at what has happened previously. Look over the pond. Look what happened to Donald Trump. They are playing the same playbook here. Look what happened to Marine Le Pen in France. It's lawfare being used against right-wing politicians because they cannot beat them on the battlefield of ideas. That's what this is about. And Nigel Farage, I am a huge supporter of. I have been for many, many years. He got me into politics when we wanted to leave the EU when I was 14 years old, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. That man has defended this country. He has gone out and supported this country, and millions of people want him to be our next Prime Minister. And quite frankly, if we stick together, if we go forward, and if we believe behind Farage, we will win. But we have to keep the faith.
Now, he, of course, is going to be keynote speaker at CPAC Great Britain. First of all, explain the concept of CPAC, because, you know, those of us who hang about in political circles, we know it's been going on in America for ages. There's CPAC Australia. What is CPAC? Why is it coming here?
Of course. So CPAC was actually started in 1974 by Ronald Reagan himself. And it's all about bringing conservatives, small c conservatives, together, patriots together, who want the same things. And it's happened, like you say, in America for many, many years. It's happened in Australia, in Japan, in Hungary, Poland, all over the world. And for some reason, it's never happened here. And now is the time, I can't think of a better time, to actually bring together the right, galvanise the right behind core principles and ideas about actually how do we defeat the establishment, how do we tackle the blob, and how do we change this country going forward? Because if we don't tackle those questions in 2029 or even 2027, we will not change anything.
So this is taking place in London.
Yeah.
Tell everyone about the dates, tell everyone how they can access tickets, and most importantly, tell everyone about, if they buy tickets, who they're going to see and what they're going to be able to enjoy.
So it's next week, the 16th to the 17th, or 16th to the 18th of July, sorry. It is going to be an absolutely star-studded event. We've obviously got the wonderful Alex Phillips.
Woohoo!
We've got people like, obviously, Nigel Farage, Liz Truss, Jacob Rees-Mogg. We've got people from across the pond as well coming over. We've got people from Australia. So Senator Pauline Hanson from Australia is coming over. But we've also got all three parties of the right coming from Australia, from the Liberals, the Nationals and One Nation. We've got people from Europe, MEPs coming across as well. We have got a real coalition of patriots who want to come together and actually save the Western world, because this is what this is about. This is about saving the West, defending our culture, defending our values, and being proud of who we are.
The people listening to this might be thinking, that sounds like the sort of a political Glastonbury I fancy going to. So if they did think, that sounds like a good old jaunt down to London, what do they have to do?
Well, all they need to do is go to our website, which is www.cpacgb. You can just type that into Google, CPACGB. You can go on our Twitter as well, and you will be able to buy tickets. You can buy general tickets for £100. You can buy dinner tickets as well if you're, fancy. You can also buy some very special VIP tickets, which will get some very nice access as well to a lot of our speakers and guests. But it's going to be a really fantastic event. But we want it to be fun. A lot of these conferences on the right are quite intellectual, some might say a little bit boring. We want it to be fun, we want it to be high energy, we want people to actually come away and think, yes, we can do this together. And then we're going to have some really interesting conversations. We're going to have grooming gang survivors, we are going to have people from the Bitcoin industry who have been basically ostracised for many years by the government. We're going to have people from all different walks of life who want to change this country, who want to build better of this country and actually save the West. Because if we don't actually bring these people together, because what we also need to do in 2029 or 2027, whenever the next general election is actually identify people who are going to serve, not just as MPs, but also people in government who can actually run departments, who can run agencies, and actually who can help save this country. And if we don't do that, nothing's going to change, because we can't have the same people running the show.
Yeah, I think also, it's about time that across the international political theatre that the right works together, because sadly all the supranational entities or the sort of non-government agencies, they're all dominated by leftists who know each other, pick up the phone to each other, coordinate, stitch things up. So I think it's a brilliant initiative. I'm very much looking forward to being part of it. And I hope you join Kane and I and come along. Kane Blackwell, CPAC GB organiser. Thanks for coming into the studio, my darling. Right, if you want to get in touch with the programme, it's 03444991000. That's the number if you want to register your interest to get on the phone live in the studio. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a cheeky little voicio. 8722 is the number if you want to send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. Let us do some messages before we go to break. They had 403 elected MPs and couldn't find a replacement leader in any of them. It shows the real state of the party. General election now, says Jane in Kidderminster. I agree. General election now. General election now. Hey, got some breaking talking about elections. We found out that the by-election in Clacton, triggered by Nigel Farage's decision to quit and fight to regain his seat, will be held on August the 13th. That's a tendering district council giving us that information. August the 13th, there you are. Will reform take out the trash? Hi, Alex. So it is OK for 322 Labour MPs to back Burnham, but what about the 70 million of the rest of us, says Michael in Hockley. Democracy is a byproduct. They don't want it. Ever since Brexit, they tried to overrun that result. They still haven't given us what we asked for. We've seen the musical chairs from the Conservative Party, the conspiring coups, the politicking, cancelling local elections, changing the mandate, fiddling with the plebiscite, votes to 16-year-olds, going to a form of PR over in Wales. What are they going to do next? They will stop at nothing to make sure that our voice is not heard. And I'm fed up with it. We need to stand up and remind ourselves and the world we invented parliamentary democracy. We're not going to let these political elites ride roughshod over it. We will keep forcing their hand until they listen. It is our right. We pay them to serve us, and they needed to be reminded of that fact. Badenoch should not have joined the left in her attack on Nigel. She lacks courage, and that is imperative in a true democratic leader, says Sue. Well, look, I agree, democracy is democracy. You might disagree with why someone's called a by-election. I certainly disagreed with the fact that Joss Shimmons stood down to allow Burnham to have a run at becoming our Prime Minister without a mandate. And the other parties took part in that, didn't they? So why, all of a sudden, do they feel slightly allergic to the prospect of being at the ballot box? They seem to have suffered from a case of hives when it came to local elections. They seem to suffer from a case of hives when it comes to gerrymandering constituencies. Brexit referenda, the lot of it. They don't like democracy because they don't like you. They don't like what you think, what you feel, what you know, what you can see, what you can hear. They hate you. And they don't want you to have any part in how this country is run. Never forget that. You've got to stand up against it. Right, that's it. We're going to go to advert break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some sort of culture war issues with the brilliant Connie Shaw, who's the External Affairs Officer for the Free Speech Union. Some good stuff coming up just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, if there was one image, one story, which reverberated around the world and showed quite how fascistic a state we currently live in, currently undergoing another communist coup, it was the information that the Father Ted creator, Graham Linehan, amazing comedy writer, was arrested by armed police at Heathrow Airport last September after a trans activist complained about things he had written on social media. Oh, hurty words. They turned up with their guns and their cuffs, dragged him into a prison cell. He was arrested on suspicion of a public order offence, questioned for several hours in a way that looked extremely frightening, extremely over the top. Well, it now transpires that he has reportedly been paid £25,000 in compensation by the Met Police. Well, let's speak to Connie Shaw, External Affairs Officer at the Free Speech Union. I mean, it really was a sight that should send shivers down the spine of any freedom-loving Brit. The idea that you could write something on social media, and we've seen this happen, haven't we, with J.K. Rowling. We saw this happen with Alison Pearson. But the optics of the way Graham Linehan was apprehended at the airport were just breathtaking.
Yeah, I think that for anyone who had previously doubted or smeared free speech campaigners as being sort of having confected right-wing outrage at something that wasn't really happening. After what happened to Graham Linehan, no one can deny that the way that our police have been behaving, or the things that they are learning in the College of Policing, or their priorities aren't completely perverted. And as you say, absolutely broke the global news. He ended up testifying in Congress about what had happened to him. The fact that he was flying from America, Graham had to leave the UK to live in the United States because of the fact that he had lost so much work and he was being targeted time and time again by trans activists in the UK. He couldn't live here anymore. He had to flee to America to continue his life. When he was on that flight on the way back to the UK, he was coming back because he needed to attend a separate trial at the behest of another trans activist. And so the idea that the police thought it was appropriate or even necessary to arrest him as soon as he landed at Heathrow, as though he was a criminal on the loose who would try to avoid the police getting in contact with him. He was on the way back, flew hours across, halfway across the road to go to another trial. It's not like he's someone who won't respond to police who are trying to get in contact with him. That separate trial, he was also acquitted completely for, with the help of the Free Speech Union as well. So the circumstances were just absolutely shocking. His blood pressure got to such a dangerous level that the police ended up sending him to A&E because it was in stroke territory. Because this, Graham has even spoken recently online, what has happened to him has really affected him as a person. He has PTSD style sort of trauma from what's happened to him, and the way that it, just standing up for women and children has completely turned his life upside down. And so you're absolutely right, Alex, that his story, without, in as much as it was horrific what happened to him, and it should never have happened, the fact that it did happen really broke any kind of illusion that what was going on in the UK wasn't something to be worried about.
And yet it is still going on. I mean, Lord Young, your boss, had such great foresight when he set up the Free Speech Union, because he identified that we now live in a nation, a police state, where lawfare is used against celebrities, against journalists, against everyday people, in order to persecute them, in order to push them out of public life, in order to silence and censor them. Do you see echoes of this happening in politics right now?
Yes, I mean, the amount of councillors that we have coming to the Free Speech Union who their political opponents report them to the local council authority for asking questions. I mean, one case that everyone should know about is the case of Councillor John Edwards. He's a local councillor in Sandhurst, for simply asking questions about a hotel that's housing asylum seekers from Afghanistan. He has been investigated, put on trial by the very same other councillors who've accused him of being racist. You can find all of his information online. He's got a crowdfunder. This happens all the time. Another councillor in Cornwall, Dulcie Tudor, she was a member of the public, I think, complained about her because she'd expressed her gender critical views online, and she was put through the mill, even though she's an elected politician. So this is not just happening, we may see it happening, at the big scale in Westminster, with the amount of complaints against Nick Timothy, for example, for Islamophobia and racism, for his criticism of Islamic practices, but it also happens all the time in local politics. And it's a huge reason why it puts people off from going into politics. And it's really, really sad state of affairs, because it'll be preventing the right kind of people who want to go in and represent people who haven't been heard over the last 20 years, and they're being prevented from doing so because of vexatious complaints from their political opponents.
It's a real grip of evil when people are persecuted for standing up against wickedness. It really is. And talking about that, this, I think, is just, as a Christian, I find this story heartbreaking. It's a success story in the end, but essentially a school chaplain was sacked and blacklisted by the Church of England over a gender-related sermon. The chaplain in question, Bernard Randall, was actually reported to terrorism watchdogs, and he was sacked after addressing the subject of identity politics back in 2019. Basically, he pointed out that the Church of England viewed marriage as being between biological men and women. That is true. I've read the Bible. It is there as a rich scene throughout all of Jesus' teachings that is what marriage is. And so he says this. And at this same school, where they had enabled some unvetted external campaign group and charity, Educate and Celebrate, to come and say to the school that they needed to smash heteronormativity and embed so-called queer theory at the school. Then when he turns around and goes, well, in the Bible, marriage is between a man and women. 7 years. 7 years he was banned from teaching, banned from preaching, treated like a monster, like a terrorist, for just saying what's in the Bible.
It's one of the most shocking cases. I mean, we're in a situation now, Alex, in Britain where if you simply preach the teachings of the Bible, espouse Christian belief, you can be reported as a safeguarding risk to children and reported to prevent as though you are a terrorist. But if you insult Islam, you can be arrested and thrown in the back of a police van, such as that chap on the weekend in Leeds. And, you know, this is not the first time that we have seen cases like this. We had a case at the FSU where a teacher at another school, he was reported to local authorities, and the police, investigative police to do with child abuse, even got involved because he told some students that Britain was a Christian country. I mean, this is not, we have lots of cases where basically, again, people who disagree with others will report them as safeguarding risks to children. The worst kind of accusation
what
you
is
can
so
face.
sinister? What is so sick and sinister about all of this is the people who are being arrested and persecuted are the people standing up for safeguarding. The ones saying, I'm not sure we should have hypersexualized messages in schools. I'm not sure we should be convincing young people that they're born in the wrong bodies, leading them to being brainwashed to taking life-altering drugs or genital mutilation. I'm not sure men should be allowed in women's single-sex spaces. It really is a sign of something really deeply entrenched and sinister in this country when those people fighting to protect some of the most vulnerable in society are the ones being persecuted. Connie, thank you so much for all that you do, all that the Free Speech Union does. My goodness, I don't think this country could survive without them right now. Never forget the sort of dystopian place we currently live. We've got to keep fighting, folks. We've got to keep pushing back. Right, if you want to have a chit-chat with me at the end of the show, you can phone this number and register your interest, because in the last quarter of an hour of this hour, we're going to be taking your calls. So roll up and let us know your number and what you want to say. 0344499 1000 is your normal network rate. Use that number as well to send a WhatsApp 87222 if you'd rather send me a text message. Write the word talk before you text. Now, I'm going to remind you again that the World Cup is in full swing. I'm definitely going to be watching the England match tomorrow. So when I'm bleary-eyed presenting my show on a Sunday, you know why. Pray for a swift finish. I'm not sure my poor little body could stand extra time and penalties. But, you know, hey-ho, I'll be on something non-alcoholic. No, I won't. She's lying. Anyway, to celebrate the fact that we still have an opportunity to celebrate the joy while it still lasts, we're giving you the opportunity to boost your bank balance by £26,000 entirely tax-free. The whole 26,000 will go to you to spend as you wish. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, have you noticed we live in a pretty febrile world? Very unsafe world, some might say. The threat of Putin breathing down Europe's neck, challenging borders, testing security, looking for weaknesses. And at the same time, Iran, still up to no good. You would think that making sure that the military is fully funded, that there is a rich seam of geopolitical awareness that runs through every government department, and that this would be a priority of our incoming Prime Minister. Think again. Because what we do know, of the very little that we know about auto-anointed Burnham and what Burnhamism might look like, is he's already capitulated to the hard left, the pro-Islamist element in his party. He's going after those votes, isn't he? Because he's done the politically vacuous, weak and frankly extremely dangerous thing of posturing, taking an anti-Israeli stance. If you thought things were going to get better, a la Tony Blair 1997, mark my words, I think it's not. Let's speak now to Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Reform UK's Chief Advisor on Global Affairs. Let's start off with this. I mean, not only is he already repeating what to me seem to be Hamas lines and essentially trying to appease people who want an Islamist prism through which to regard international geopolitical affairs, he's also potentially probably going to face an international military crisis within weeks of taking power. Now, that's according to a former Downing Street Chief Foreign Policy Advisor, John Bew, who stepped down last year after serving 4 prime ministers, and he thinks there'll be a major provocation from President Putin to mark the auto-anointment of Burnham. Alan, where do we begin? He's not up for it, is he?
Well, it's all good news, isn't it, Alex? We have a new Prime Minister who knows nothing about foreign affairs or defence policy. This is somebody who, in his entire political career, and it's been a long political career, he's not just turned up yesterday, he's been around for 25 years on the political scene, has never made any significant intervention on foreign policy or defence policy. He started to feel his way very late into the process by suggesting, he'd like us to buy more British gear. Fine. But when it comes to Israel, as you pointed out, he's decided that Israel's, and the language fascinating, he said that Israel's immediate response after October the 7th, i.e. the bit when they were just attacked by terrorists, civilians were murdered, raped and abducted, we should have been harder on them, he said. That's his line. That's the sort of foreign policy he wants to be focusing on. And of course, he's got nothing beyond that to contribute. A casual relationship with the US, he says, our key ally. And of course, we don't know what his position these days is on rejoining the EU. So it's all a mess. It's a total mess. And with these threats, Alex, to us, and with the idea that there could indeed be a reconflagration in the Middle East, I don't think anyone can have confidence with Andy Burnham in charge that Britain's going to have any kind of response worth noting.
The problem, the thing that terrifies me the most is it's becoming clear as time passes that Burnham's job, pushed by the radical left of his party, is going to be to try and win back votes from the people who went to the pro-Gaza MPs, win back votes from people who support the Green Party. And so we can see the direction of travel he's going to go down, which is to oblivion, mine, yours and everyone listening's. And we've just heard as well, so if they want to cover off the threats from Zach Polanski, it turns out the Green Party would like to see economic sanctions on Iran lifting and improving diplomatic relations with the regime. How thick are these people? How stupid are these people that they think they can sing Kumbaya with a load of beardy, weirdy ayatollahs who want to obliterate the entirety of the West, who will sooner kill each and every one of us? You cannot negotiate with a terrorist. My fear now is Burnham's going to see that and echo it.
Well, this is a danger with appeasement. Once you start appeasing people, the temptation is always to continue appeasing people. It's been fascinating, by the way, watching the reaction to his Palestine comments, his Gaza comments. You've got a whole host of people who have said, well, it's a great start. It's a start. So the madness of this is that he's going to have to continue to give concessions to these people. And even then, there's going to be a debate about whether they'll ever accept enough from him to go down his path. He should surely realise these people are fundamentally unappeasable. This has nothing to do with, you know, one vote or two here or there. These are people who are ideologically opposed to any kind of sane Middle Eastern policy. And if he proceeds in pushing his line towards giving concession, appeasement, all that's going to do is that British national security is going to be undermined. Those people still won't vote for him, and it will just end up in Britain looking ridiculous on the world scene, and of course pandering to this dangerous phenomenon of sectarian voting that we've already seen is so damaging.
Oh, they're so sure of their own invincibility, these marauding people, that there they were rioting because poor little Morocco didn't get through in the World Cup. They know that they're untouchable. It is terrifying. And all the while, to coincide with this, is a parallel narrative. We're learning that Iran hatched a plan to assassinate Donald Trump. This is intelligence that has come from Israel that was told directly to the president. I mean, look, of course they are. We know that. We're, as a nation in Britain, we haven't prescribed the IRGC. I don't know why. Seems a curious move to me. But of course, Tehran wants to eliminate President of America. I mean, these people are not kind and cuddly. They have no interest in trying to seek any sort of peace deal because they're lunatics.
Exactly. They're lunatics, and it's dangerous to assume anything different. And look, from their perspective, it's perfectly rational to try and kill Trump. That's the line they've been doing for 50 years as a regime, opposed to America, opposed to Israel, and opposed to Britain. All those things are true. They're as true now as they were 50 years ago. And yet we in the West have tried to delude ourselves for decades, saying, you know, there's a version of this regime we can do business with. There are moderates in this regime. We've just got to find them and deal with them. It's nonsense. The whole basis of the regime is a radical, revolutionary Islamist regime. It's been that way since 1979. It'll be that way till it ends. The only question is, how quickly are we going to wake up and decide we need to end it as opposed to mollycoddle it?
There's been reports today, Alan, about, you know, there being sort of complaints and criticisms of there is going to be, you know, mass hunger in Gaza because Israel is blocking food supplies from getting into the Strip. How true is that? Because my understanding is there's actually a heck of a lot of food being sent into that little enclave at the moment. What do you make of those headlines?
Well, the headlines are the typical headlines that are basically not based on any reality. We know full well that food has, of course, gotten into Gaza. We know food has been there on a regular basis. We know that Hamas steals the food because, of course, the situation is still not resolved, where Hamas is supposed to give up its weapons, give up its power, and move towards a sort of a technocratic government that will actually get Gaza working. The amazing thing about all this, Alex, is that we had a roadmap for peace. Hamas allegedly signed up to it. They're the ones not doing the bits towards bringing the Gaza conflict to a close by giving up their weapons and participating in the sense of, you know, doing what they promised they would do. You would then, if they did that, you would have a technocratic government in Gaza, the Israelis would withdraw, and you'd get on with it. Once again, though, Israel's getting the blame. It's a lunatic situation where Hamas is responsible, and once again, the global media only have one interest, attacking the Jewish state. And we know what's at the core of it, don't we? It's anti-Semitism. That's what it's all about. Don't punish the terrorists, punish the people who are trying to do their best to end the situation, not the people who are trying to keep it going, i.e. Hamas.
I was reading Andrew Fox, who also works at Henry Jackson Society's very stark commentary on Burnham today on his Substack, and he couched things in, I think, very, very good terms when he was pointing out that all that money that has come from US aid, from UK taxpayers, from the UN into Gaza enabled Hamas to build tunnels that they could hide their fighters in while they used human beings as collateral damage, as lambs to the slaughter, as sacrifices at their perverse altar of their death cult, so everyone could point the finger of blame at Israel. Our money has been used to murder the innocent civilians in Gaza.
And Alex, you made a great point, because guess what? In the language of the left, that makes the British government, successive British governments, complicit in war crimes. Note that term, complicit in war crimes. Previous British governments have been able to enable war crimes to happen, and they haven't stopped funding them either. They've kept on funding these institutions that prove porous and which enable terrorism to happen. So where's the investigation? Where are the guilty men and women? Where are they being charged by the left? Where are the protests? None of that's happening. We're just getting absolute nonsense as usual, saying saying that there's only one set of war criminals and they're Israeli. The real war criminals are Hamas and the people who've enabled Hamas to do the civilian atrocities that they've done.
I couldn't agree more. Dr. Alan Mendoza, thank you ever so much. It's always great to have you on the programme. An extremely erudite, forthright man. And look, believe you me, if you don't want your coins ending up in the pockets of a terrorist, you better stop paying your taxes, eh? Because I have a feeling Burnham will supercharge all of that again. And again, you know, mark the words of Andrew Fox. We have paid, us as British taxpayers, have directly funded people in Gaza being deliberately slaughtered while the fighters hide underground, put on the front line to create as much carnage, as much collateral damage, as much loss of life as possible so they can drive their sick anti-Israel agenda. That's right, you and I have helped build those tunnels that the militants hid in underneath schools and hospitals while deliberately using women and children as human shields. We paid for it. Burnham's going to make us pay more, isn't he? These people are sick. All right, let's take a short break. And as promised, after the break, I'm going to be chatting to some of you. So if you want that to include you, the number is 03444 99 1000. Going to be reading out messages and WhatsApps as well. So if you want to send a quickie text, 87222. Write the word talk before you type out your message. And you can also use 03444 99 1000 to leave me a WhatsApp. We're back after this.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child-sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, right, it's your opportunity to take over the controls. Let's read some of your messages. This country will not survive 3 years of Burnham. Bing! Not sure it's going to survive 3 weeks of Burnham. Oh, I bet he's praying that we will win the World Cup and then there'll be a big old bank holiday and then that can give him the Burnham bounce and we'll all be positive and we'll forget what a burning dumpster fire our country's in. But he ain't going to last long before it all falls apart. He's got like a £125 billion deficit to deal with. A load of backbenchers who still won't let him make any amendments to welfare, despite the IMF saying you're too big to bail out Britain. If you don't make these cuts, you're in trouble deep. He's going to be challenged by Putin. He'll be testing to see whether there's any strength and solidity in his spine. Of course, there's not. The man is just a vapid, you know, high street hairdresser, quite frankly, who's never had an actual job in his life. Can't wait for him to take control. And all the extreme leftists can see that he's easy to push about and drag around in whatever direction they want to drag him in, looking at their seats thinking, we might lose these to Islamists. We might lose these to the Green Party. Same thing, really. I think it's about 98 constituents which are under threat from sectarian voting when it comes to the Labour Party's future fortunes at the ballot box. So if you think Andy Burnham's going to come in and somehow solve all of our problems with hope in his heart, with a progressive message, Oh, my goodness. I mean, I don't like Starmer at all. But at least there's something about Starmer which feels like it's a concrete human with a brain. Andy Burnham is the political equivalent of a blimmin' emoji. I mean, seriously, that's what we got to have. That's what's going to run the country at probably one of the most critical points in our human history in this nation. That thing. Look at the facts. We have an air force with few pilots, an army with now obsolete weapons, and a navy with no ships that actually work. Putin is in pain because he's laughing that much at us. We've got unprotected infrastructure. We haven't even started talking about what's going on with the grid. Oh, I hope I get to squeeze that one in later. Yeah, I'll squeeze that in somewhere. But you and I, we need to have a conversation about the fact that all of this greenery and the fact that Ed Miliband is now ridden roughshod over planning rules to impose a massive super solar farm on perfectly viable agricultural land in Norfolk and Lincolnshire is actually basically going to blow up the grid like it did in Spain. Because apparently, the French base grid. Right, let me explain something about how energy works for those that don't know. You can have all of your renewables, but some days it's hot, some days it ain't. Sometimes the wind blows, sometimes it doesn't. So that means that all of these huge jolts and peaks and troughs in our energy supply kind of messes up all of our interconnectors and our network. And so what is always needed is something that shows consistency, that can sort of paper over and level off the energy supply. And normally we get alerts in winter when people are putting on their heating more, they're at home more, it's darker, so lights are on, and so we need to use a lot more power. And normally, NISO, who run our energy grid, say, oh, could be some problems here, too many peaks and troughs, things could all shut down. They're having to give those warnings now. They're having to give those warnings because the baseload in France, which is set by nuclear, is struggling because the power stations are struggling in the hot weather. And I don't know if you remember when there were mass blackouts in Spain and France last summer. Well, the more we go solar, the more we go wind, the more we are going to face exactly the same because they all rely on something more stable and more dependable ticking over in the background. But Mad Red Ed is pushing this agenda. Like I said, attacking farmers and farmland, stuff that's going to apparently pose a risk to public health and safety. But he doesn't care because he's a zealot. And you know that, that Andy Burnham's just going to go further and faster. If I was you, I'd start buying up your candles for winter, my friends. Get that firewood in now. Get those candles stocked up. It ain't going to be easy living in super socialist Britain. Anyway, Stella's going to talk about it. There we go. Covered it off already. Let's do some calls now. Let's speak to Elliot, who's in Hertfordshire. Good morning, Elliot.
Well, hi, Alex. Brilliant show. Look, this is serious stuff. You don't have to be a PhD in international economics or politics to understand that the complete fabric of our nation, our heritage and our culture and our way of life has been ruined by successive governments. This revolting mob in Edgware Road, I was near there at the time and I heard a lot of carry on and it was very, very unpleasant. Why do they do it? It's very simple. Because our fabric and our culture and our way of life has completely been eradicated by this government and successive governments beforehand. There are no boundaries anymore. There are no standards. There are no moral values. There's a complete vacuum in our society, and it has been filled by these revolting individuals, which we have imported. Yeah. This is a culture that we have imported on our Judeo-Christian way of life. It's a disgrace. Yeah. Our spirituality, our ethical standards, and our behavioural and social attitudes, which are supposed to cascade downwards, dare I say, from the king through governments, through schools and education, have all been eradicated. Yeah. And the governments in charge, this particular awful, awful man that's going to now come in, you will see, and you know already, this is going to completely eviscerate anything you and I knew about and grew up with. And he's doing it for one reason alone. One, because, well, a couple of reasons. He doesn't care about the country. The Labour Party are rotten to the core. They hate this country. They hate our values. They hate our heritage. And they hate the people who have died for this country in wars. But most of all, they want to get the 6 million Muslims who are in now and can vote for them. Of course, if I say that, I'm accused of being racist. I am talking about the reality.
Exactly. There's empirical evidence. We know how many constituencies are under threat to Labour-held seats from pro-Gaza candidates, they like to call themselves. And you're right. Doing nothing, turning a blind eye to this animalistic, bestial behaviour, this unfettered, feral savagery from these people who think they can come to this country and behave like it's the law of the blimmin' jungle, like rampaging around the streets because they say we're on your turf and we can get away with it. If we turn a blind eye to this, we're storing up something extremely combustible, extremely incendiary, extremely explosive. This needs to be dealt with severely and quickly. But who's going to do it? Who's the Prime Minister? Who's running the country? Nobody. Elliot, thank you ever so much. Let's speak to Lois in Essex. Hi, Lois.
Hi, Alex. Great show this morning.
Oh, thanks, Lo. How you doing?
I'm good. I'd just like to say I'm very, very sad at hearing the passing of Ann Widdecombe. What a brilliant woman she was. She really was. Andy Burnham, I think he's going to be 10 times worse than Starmer. He's got no mandate. He's got nothing really that I can say. We're still waiting for him to do his maiden speech for the poor people of Beaconsfield. I mean, he hasn't bothered to do that, has he?
No. He's not addressed us, has he? Has he really addressed us at all? The people of Britain who are now going to be living under Burnhamism, whatever that is? He's a coward because he's an emoji. He's a puppet for the hard left.
All we're getting is TikToks, Instagram posts.
Right. I mean, how pathetic. He acts like a 14-year-old girl. You know, that thing in Barn where they're doing the selfie of all the women going with their jazz hands. And then we learned that actually the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Palace of Westminster estate has had to chastise him because he's just running around making little viral videos for his socials like he's a 14-year-old blimmin' influencer. Not allowed to do that on the parliamentary estate. If you don't know that, Prime Minister, for crying out loud, what are we... I'm telling you, he's an emoji. The man's an emoji.
Definitely. And I actually remember it when he was in Blair Brown, whatever it was at the time. And he wasn't that good then.
Well, at least with Blair and Brown, I don't like their politics. At least they were actual intelligent people with a bit of a brain. Oh, Lois, what are we doing? Thank you for your call, my darling. Some quick breaking news before we go to break. Oh, here we go. 5 asylum seekers have won a High Court battle against the one-in, one-out deal. Remember that? They've successfully challenged the policy that barred them from appealing deportation. On it goes. When will it ever end? Certainly won't after Burnham. This show ends in an hour, so do stay tuned because there's a lot more still to come. Nadine Dorries is joining us just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Wow, 2 hours are finished. One more to go. I'm really enjoying myself, actually. Like I said, I had a lot of pent-up stuff to say over the last few days. I've been missing you guys. I have. Seriously. Sometimes I'm at home, then a new story will break on a Monday, and I've, finished my sort of little round of 3 shows on a Sunday. Then something happens on a Monday, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to hang out with my peoples. I want to talk about this with them. I've got things on my mind that I've got to just get out there into the public domain. And so I have to store it all up like a jack-in-the-box, which is why it comes to Friday and I'm like, kaboom! But anyway, here we are. I'm glad we're reunited. It's always a privilege and a pleasure having your company, and you. I mean you especially. You're my favourite. Right. OK, let us speak to Nadine Dorries, because she is not only a former Conservative minister, she is now a member of Reform UK, and there is a great deal of stuff going on in politics that we need to talk about. Someone else who made the journey from being a Conservative minister all the way to the end point of Reform UK was, of course, Ann Widdecombe. Now, we have learnt that Sir Keir Starmer has paid tribute to the late Ann Widdecombe, calling her a distinctive figure in British politics for many years. A Downing Street spokeswoman said the Prime Minister was saddened to hear of the death of Ann Widdecombe. She was a distinctive figure in British politics for many years, and he pays tribute to the conviction and dedication with which she served her country. Very appropriate words. Well done to the Prime Minister. Because without a doubt, conviction and dedication ran through Ann Widdecombe like letters inside a stick of rock. That lady, diminutive in stature, had the heart of a lion. So fierce was she. Little 4'0" Anne made full-grown men quake in their boots whenever she let rip. She was nobody's fool, and I had the privilege and honour of being able to serve alongside her in the European Parliament, learn under the wing of one of our political greats, a titan of politics. They rarely make them like it anymore. So let's have a little look at Ann Widdecombe in action. You'll notice a slightly plumper Alex, grotesquely wearing a lanyard, sitting behind her in the hemicycle. It was amazing to be able to watch her at her best. Here she goes.
17.4 million people in the biggest democratic turnout in British history voted to leave. We ended up in the European elections as the single biggest party in this parliament. Why? Why did Boris Johnson get such a massive majority in the last election? Because his basic promise was get Brexit done.
So it's making me a bit emotional because, you hear the news of somebody passing, and then there's moments where you look at something like that and it all becomes so real that we have really lost a phenomenon in politics. Well, let's speak to Nadine Dorries now, former Conservative Minister, Reform UK member. Nadine, what are your memories of the wonderful, inimitable Widdy?
A bit like your own, Alex. I mean, I sat alongside her as an MP from 2005 until she left in 2010. And those of us who were in the 2005 intake in Westminster had called her Auntie Anne because she was just so... She was a formidable intellect. She could quote Burke, Scruton, Ernst and May at you verbatim. Huge intellect. And yet... she was someone who embraced reality TV. She was on Strictly Come Dancing. I think it was Big Brother. She had lots of reality TV programmes because she knew that was a way to connect with the public in a way that politicians didn't. And she was just a very versatile all-rounder. She only told me off this time last week. It was exactly a week ago when I got my last ticking off of Anne. Which,
what was she ticking you off about?
Oh, yeah. Well, you'd probably agree very much with her, Alex. So I can't really say. I think her last words to me were, there was something, I would have to look on my phone, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you on it, but it was basically, a do not give up, you keep going kind of message. But I wasn't giving up on anything. It was we were discussing a situation. And that's the thing with Anne. She would argue with you about a particular situation, and she could annihilate most people in an argument. But if she lost the point, she would then just, with good grace, move on. But she was a doughty campaigner. She helped me when I was moving a bill to reduce the rate at which abortion took place from 20 weeks down from 24 weeks down to 20. She was just, she was, like you say, there won't be anybody like her again in Westminster.
They really won't. And I used to get the Anne ticking off. The thing is, it was maternal. It was always from a position of wanting people to be their best, wanting people to represent themselves in the best way and to keep fighting, to never give up. She was the most tenacious human being I've ever met. And you never got a filtered version of Anne, ever.
No,
and I love that. I love direct people. Now, you and Anne are two people who understands the inner workings of the Conservative Party. You better than anyone. Your books have been phenomenal. I would recommend everybody reads them because they're not hyperbole, they're not fantasy, although you'd think it is when it comes to the plots and the men in grey suits inside that party. So what do you make now of Kemi Badenoch turning around and saying to the Telegraph that she is purging would-be MPs who back net zero? She's rejecting former Conservative MPs as candidates for her party. If you don't want to leave the ECHR, don't stand for us. If you don't want to, if you want to stick with net zero targets, don't stand for us. Yet all of this, I'm well aware of certain things going on. I know what the Conservatives are up to, as do you. Do you believe this?
Well, I haven't seen it, Alex, but, you know, I'd like to hear her talk about the Windsor Framework Agreement. I'd like a little bit more in terms of the meat on the bones. It's a great headline, isn't it, to say leave the ECHR. The fact is, I know, and you know, that her MPs won't back her on doing that. And I think the reason why she's being allowed to say that, and the words are quite careful, I think the reason why she's being allowed to say it is because those MPs in her party, and I think it's someone's done an appraisal, 76% of them are Remainers and very much opposed to leaving the ECHR or abolishing and changing the Windsor Framework Agreement or anything else. I think she's been allowed to say that by those MPs in order to keep reform at bay. And I think the words she's using are very careful. I think when it actually comes to it, that isn't what's going to happen at all, because her own MPs would need to back it and would need to stand for that and need to vote for it in a lobby. And she knows they won't, but she also knows that there's absolutely no chance of them getting into a lobby to vote for it. So she's using the opportunity that she has to which some people in opposition do, to say anything in order to stay in the game and to keep a poll rating healthy. And because their poll rating has been dire, it's only become more healthy when she's been making comments like, I would leave the ECHR. Doesn't mean she'd do that. It means the likelihood of her doing that is almost zero. But she knows that's what she has to do to stay in the game and to stay relevant and stop being written off. So it's spin and politics, but it doesn't mean anything.
I mean, this is the thing. I think that, you know, after 30 years in politics of saying the same sort of thing, I think that the public would be right to believe that they can trust Nigel Farage to want to deliver upon his convictions, because he has been consistent for a long time about being anti-net zero, about wanting to massively curb immigration and for Britain to have full sovereignty. My question to you is, when it comes to Kemi Badenoch, does she actually run the party? I think we can all assume that Nigel Farage runs Reform. He's often accused of being a one-man band and overbearing. Does Kemi run the Conservatives?
No, and Kemi knows she doesn't. And actually, there's no political leader who's run the Conservatives. I always quote Boris Johnson's words to me, which were, you know, almost in surprise. I thought that power came from the people into Westminster and then from Westminster into number 10. I think it's a shock for a number of Conservative leaders once they get to that position to realise that they've been put there. They're not in charge at all. They don't have any say. They're very limited as to what they can say and what they can do. And it's just... And I still find it slightly amazing that people back the Conservative Party, because surely doesn't everybody know this by now? And I do find it amazing, because surely if people don't know that, they only need to look at the MPs in Westminster and to see what their own political beliefs are. I mean, the person who took over from me in Mid-Bedfordshire was a banker from a bank in the city who just worked on a compliance desk all of his life and was a very fierce Remainer. I mean, you don't have to look long and hard at Conservative MPs to see where their beliefs lie. And, you know, I also find it's interesting, you know, when you look at what's happening to Nigel Farage now, there have been 3 leaders or prime ministers who have been pro-Brexit. There was Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative Party leader, Boris Johnson, and Prime Minister, and now Nigel Farage, party leader, and all 3 have been suffered the consequences of vexatious complaints being made to various institutions. Ian Duncan-Smith was reported to the Standards Commissioner. It went on for something like 15 months. The media onslaught absolutely destroyed him. He had to stand down. Boris Johnson delivers on Brexit, becomes Prime Minister. How he delivered on Brexit with the onslaught he suffered and and what he went through as Prime Minister, I will never understand. But again, reported to the Privileges Committee, removed. Nigel Farage, the third Brexit leader of a party, reported to the Standards Commissioner. And that's what happens, you see. On the left and Remainers, they use institutions and processes to remove people who don't agree with them. On the right, in both actually in the Conservative Party and more so in Reform, we use the democratic process, and which is what you see Nigel going through at the moment. But the inner workings of the Conservative Party are actually the inner workings of those who will destroy anybody who's on the side of Brexit, who will not be joining the EU, and those who want to leave the ECHR and reform the Windsor Framework Agreement. It's quite a difficult situation to explain, but I think a lot of people may have an inkling by now with what's going on with Nigel, what the pattern is, and can see the pattern.
Yeah, I mean, it's vicious, without a doubt. It's a headline after headline after headline after headline after headline. But, you know, we've seen echoes of this before. We've seen it against Marine Le Pen in France. We've seen it against Geert Wilders in the PVV of Holland. We saw it against Georgescu in Romania. We've, of course, seen it infamously against Donald Trump. We saw this against, as you pointed out, Boris Johnson. And it's following a very similar pattern for those of us who are keen political observers. Who do you think is behind the, let's call it, lawfare against reform? Look, I'm not saying if people have done things wrong that they shouldn't be investigated, that things need to be declared properly, that if you're going to be taking millions of pounds from somebody, we really need to know what the ties may be, what conditions might have been attached to sums of money. But I was talking earlier about Dale Vince giving £5 million, that familiar figure, to the Labour Party, and then all of a sudden Ecotricity get contracts from the government worth £3.5 million. That is a big question mark. We have seen, rightfully so, figures fall such as Angela Rayner for potentially fiddling around where her house is not in her constituency, not paying stamp duty. Louise Haigh sounds like she's going to come back regardless of the fact that she fell on her sword. It is right that we hold politicians accountable and apply thresholds when it comes to analysing their probity. But what seems to be taking place, to me, to my eyes anyway, against reform, is something I've seen before. Where do you think it's emanating from?
Oh, you've asked me a serious question there, Alex. So that there are people in Westminster who are experts at this. Dominic Cummings, he's the person who, it was amazing actually to see that video clip of him saying a year ago, I think it was the Spectator interview, you know, they're going to go for the institutions, they're going to destroy Nigel Farage, they're going to take him out, they're going to use the processes, because he's the person who does that. So he was actually speaking about what he does. You know, get close to Dominic Cummings and he will destroy you. And Boris Johnson is the person who can tell that story best. And there are other people which, you know, I've written about in my books. And there are, you know, politicians who are no longer politicians, who are still playing a huge role in Westminster. So yeah, there are people who are good at this, who are good at, you know, there is a Labour MP, I would think most people would know his name, The complaints go in the name of other MPs, but it's this MP who's the person who pursues them. Did it with Boris Johnson, doing it now, I imagine, with Nigel Farage, did it even back in the day with IDS. There are just a group of people who work cross-party together, and they will... This is a game to them. It's a game. They enjoy it. It's the thrill to them of being able to do this. And you know who they are, but they are a group of people who have a huge amount of power. They're very clever. They know they are. I think they think it's funny that other people don't know how to remove prime ministers and don't understand the processes, but it is quite simple. You know, have your connections in the media, be very well connected in the media, even be former journalists. Have the processes out to a T, know how to report to the Standards Commissioner and the Privileges Committee, work across party to join alliances with those who agree with you on issues like Brexit. And, you know, you've got this combination that can literally remove a prime minister or a party leader.
Yeah, and well, like you said, it is sort of like a, you know, megalomaniacal perversion with these people. They will happily just stab the knife into the back of anybody and play their power games. And it's always at the cost of the country. Always, because we then don't have stability, we don't have leadership, we don't have secure governments, we don't have long-term plans or strategies. None of this is in the interests of the voter. And talking about what is in the interests of the voter when it comes to democracy, what do you make of all the other parties boycotting the Clacton by-election? Because without a doubt, look, Nigel said it himself, when he said, look, this is what I'm going to do, you're desperate to make me face the voters because you want to get rid of me, fine, come on, let's do it right now. And they've all said, no, we're not going to do it. And they're sitting there taking selfies. You know, Rachel is like, oh, let him argue with the bin. Labour MPs going, oh, look, he can sit on the green benches here, and a sick little selfie. You know, the legacy media are lapping it up. They love it. They're all tittering away because they think they've won the game. Have they?
You know, the reason why the other political parties haven't put themselves up is A, because they can't afford it. After Makerfields and Gorton and Denton, they haven't got their coffers. Reform have raised the most money as a political party. They can't afford it. The Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, the Green parties, they certainly cannot afford to fight a by-election. Particularly one they absolutely know they're going to be humiliated in, they're going to lose. Now, you know, it may be a bit of a joke that can't bin face, but, you know, hey, that's British democracy, that's how it works, we have to take the rough with the smooth. But it's, you know, of course they weren't going to stand in that by-election. They would be utterly humiliated. And, you know, if I was Cammy Badenoch or Ed Davey or... It's amazing how they all colluded, by the way, even Rupert Lowe. They all got their story together. This was a decision, I'm sure, that was jointly taken between all the opposition parties, the other parties. Of course, they weren't going to stand against Nigel Farage. So it was absolutely no surprise to me whatsoever. But if, you know, you'd said to me before Nigel Farage made his announcement, Nigel Farage is going to do this, what do you think the other parties are going to do? I would have said to you, well, if I was Kemi, I'd say, no, we're not doing it. We're not going to waste that money because he's going to win and we're going to be humiliated even further than we were in Makerfield. And, you know, with the other minor parties would have said exactly the same thing.
Well, this is it. They think that they've humiliated him. And certainly that, you know, some of the headlines have been extremely negative, even from the right-wing press, calling the forthcoming Clacton by-election, which we now know will happen on August the 13th, a farce. But
it is a farce.
It is a farce.
It is a farce. It's a genius farce, though, right. Because what Nigel is doing, I believe, is this election's now been called. He's going to go out and make his case, and he's going to tell the people what he would tell the Standards Commissioner. Now, just bear in mind the backdrop to this. The Standards Commissioner is being used as a political tool to smash Nigel Farage and Reform over the head with.
As they did with Boris Johnson, as they did with Ian Duncan Smith.
So that's what he's being used for. And these vexatious Remainers use those institutions as a political tool to remove Brexit leaders. And so Daniel Greenback, who is the Standards Commissioner, he's a very austere man. And I'm just putting this out there, but I think it's almost certain that he would find Nigel guilty in some way because the Privileges Committee found Boris Johnson guilty for thinking thoughts they thought he must have had. So they don't even need evidence to find someone guilty. So I'm very sure he has people sat on his committee, lay people, who are pious, unworldly, not the kind of people who you're going to meet down in Greggs or at Tesco checkout. They are pious, unworldly, have no understanding of the political processes, literally no understanding that they are being used by people far cleverer than they are, who do understand politics. And they're high-minded, and they would also, I think, find Nigel, make some scenario up by which Nigel is guilty. You know, I was almost removed from Parliament, me and 4 other MPs, for calling the Privileges Committee a kangaroo court. Nigel is now facing his own kangaroo court with the Standards Commissioner. But Nigel's going to go to the people of Clacton, and they're going to be in the election, and hopefully they're going to re-elect him. Now, what is the Standards Commissioner then going to do? Is he then going to say, right, he's been re-elected MP, the process starts again, I find him guilty? Is he going to ignore the fact that all of those people in Clacton who will have been told all of the details by the 13th of August don't agree with him? And is he going to call another by-election, which is probably what's going to happen? And I think what it shows is what a farce these committees are, how out of touch and how farcical they are. It's not the by-election which is the farce, it's the Standards Committee and the process which is the farce.
It's a hypocrisy as well as saying, well, you know, go along with the pantomime in Makerfield to have an unmandated man suddenly become our Prime Minister talking about 10-year plans, but when it comes to Farage, no, we won't engage. Because we're the collateral damage, aren't we? I mean, Nadine, there's barely been democracy for 10 years. We've seen that since the Brexit referendum. We're not only ignored, we're demonised, but also they're now laughing at us. If they're laughing at Nigel Farage versus a bin, that is laughing in the face of voters, because the voters of Clacton are being denied a proper political battle, as they were denied delivery of the Brexit referendum result, as they attempted to deny voters up and down the country from having local elections, as they are trying to mess about with the plebiscite, giving 16-year-olds the vote, moving to some sort of proportional representation if they think they're going to win. For about 10 years now in our politics, democracy has been an inconvenience and an option at best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, it's really interesting because the prime ministers and political leaders that survive, not only in the UK, but across Europe, across the world, actually, if you look at Macron and others, are those who are in the centre, who are Remainers. You know, David Cameron had to go when he lost the referendum. Tony Blair, centrist. David Cameron, centrist. But he only went because he lost the referendum. Those who are in the centre of politics don't get the attacks, and they are the ones who are supported. Processes aren't used against them. They aren't reported to Standards and Privileges Committee and various. And some might say, oh, well, they didn't do anything wrong. I can tell you there are lots of things that, you know, why is Keir Starmer only been removed by Andy Burnham? You know, all the Lord Darley stuff. Angela Rayner coming back after...
It's worse than that, isn't it? We've actually had a Prime Minister and Attorney General whose former clients list as so-called human rights lawyers read as the who's who scum of the earth anti-British foreign enemy brigade.
And then Louise Haigh is actually a convicted fraudster, I believe, and I think or certainly has a criminal record for... Maybe I'm not actually sure the details, but you know, Louise Haigh was it was a very serious offence. It's not just a retread. It's not just someone popping back into cabinet. It was a serious offence for fraud. So you know, it's like, but people may say, oh well, you know, they didn't do it. They certainly have, and it's but it's interesting. It's only the Brexit supporting leaders who face this onslaught.
Oh, Nadine, I love catching up with you. I could spend hours doing it. We've run out of time now. But, you know, I reckon you and I should get together and do a big sort of hour-long sit-down interview and start blowing the doors off this thing a little bit, because you know a lot, I know a lot, and actually the general public shouldn't have to live in the dark when it comes to what goes on at the highest levels of politics. I'm sick to death of it. Sick to death. Nadine, thank you ever so much. The magnificent, the courageous Nadine Dorries. Such a huge fan of Nadine's. OK, let's do a couple of messages, shall we? Then after that, we're going to do a few calls and some voice notes. So let's get through some messages first. Hi, Alex. Regarding Burnham, I fear he will enter into lots and lots of small bilateral agreements with the EU, which when added together will be like being back in the EU, says Brian. Oh, you're wrong on that, Brian. It ain't going to be lots and lots of little deals. They've actually organised a big summit to try and drag us back in all but name, to try and sort of bind the successive government, because the EU are looking at what's coming over the horizon and seeing it could be a sort of more pro-Brexit Conservative Party, if you believe Badenoch, or Farage as Prime Minister, and are trying to do everything they can to tie us in knots. So it ain't a few small deals. It's much worse than that. England has more football thugs than any other country in the world. English football clubs were once banned for 5 years from participating in European competitions. What happened is not unique to Moroccan fans. You are just racist people, says Ben in Stockwell. Ben, did you look at that footage? Should we roll that footage again? Should we have a look? Should we use our eyes to see, evidentially, who is running around crashing the joint? Because unless I've suddenly gone colourblind, unless my eyes deceive me, unless it wasn't Morocco playing France yesterday and Morocco losing, I'm pretty sure that the people causing all that chaos on the streets, chasing the police officers, are not native Brits. Now, that's not to say we haven't had football hooliganism. That's not to say that people sitting in the terraces of football clubs up and down the country are all angels. But I'm not being a racist. I'm saying if you come into our country on a visa and behave like that, your visa should be revoked. It's what any sane democracy would do, Ben. Hi, Alex. I've just come home from a week in Italy. And how nice it was to go to a place that was so full of Italian culture, where people were disciplined and the streets were clean. You could see the Italian people and the Italian culture, and that the area we visited had not lost its identity. In coming home, it showed the contrast, how we've allowed ourselves to be eroded. I served my country in the armed forces. Thank you, Dave. And I'm disappointed in what we've become because of our spineless politicians and do-gooders. Dave, there are parts of Italy, right? You go to parts of Milan and it's, you know, it is a jungle. It ain't pretty. But I agree, at least Italians still hold very dear to a pride in their country, their cuisine, their way of life, their architecture. There are still parts of England which are relatively untouched, but I'm afraid they're diminishing by the day. Michelle says, oh, Alex, what a sad day, hearing of the loss of lovely, lion-hearted Anne, a little lady with the spirit of a titan. OK, we're taking a short break. After that, we're taking your calls. Back after this.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child-sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Shall we treat ourselves, shall we indulge in a lovely little voice note? I think so. Here's Kevin.
Hi Alex, Andy Burnham. I don't know where to start. It's just a continuation of Starmer, but further left. His statement about Israel and Palestine. I'm absolutely sick of hearing about Israel and Palestine, if I'm honest. I'm just an ordinary voter that votes in local elections, general elections, and I want my country sorting out first. I want the boats to be stopped. I want mass immigration to become under control. I want my bills to come down. I want tax to come down. And I also want free speech to come back, because it only seems on talk where you can have a little bit of free speech. Even that's been stopped under this government. So please sort this country out before we start thinking about sorting other countries out. That's all we want. But I'm guessing nobody listens to us as usual.
Oh, the plaintive tones of Kevin there, but he's absolutely right. I'm sick of hearing about blimmin' Gaza. It ain't got nothing to do with us. Like I said, in fact, our taxpayers' money was spent aiding and abetting a violent, murderous, death cult terrorist organisation. You know, people should be put in prison for the treachery that has been conducted at the hands of the Foreign Office, giving our money, my money and your money, to keffir-wearing monsters who want to use their own citizens as human shields, building tunnels underground for militia to hide in while using the population to try and make sure that there are optics of a bloodbath just so they can point the finger of accusation against Israel. We have conspired financially with a terrorist organisation, and Burnham wants to do even more. Whee! What a sick world we live in. Let's speak now to Mark in Lincolnshire. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Hi there.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, just on this, the Clapton by-election, really. Yeah, I just think, you know, listening to you with Nadine earlier, I mean, it's like conspiracy hour or something. Now, I can't speak for any other party, but I do know Restore Britain had nothing to do with that. We came out about 3 or 4 hours before anybody else with the idea of not standing in this by-election, because why the hell should we? You know, because at the end of the day...
Why should you partake in democracy? I don't know. Perhaps you rather like democracy and giving people a choice. No?
I don't know, Alex. How is this democracy when you've got a guy who's being investigated, who wants to control the narrative, throws his toys out the pram and decides, well, no, I'm going to put it the people versus the establishment. Come off it. I mean, my goodness me.
But you're now part of the uni party, aren't you? You're there with your chums in the Lib Dems and the Labour and the Tories all boycotting it together, aren't you?
Well,
aren't you?
And so bloody what? We do it independently as Restore Britain.
Oh, don't you just, because it's all conspiracy that you're in the pockets of the Conservatives. I've just made that up because I'm a fantasist. I might know something that you don't, Mark.
Actually, yes, you are.
Oh, no, I'm not. That's the problem, Mark. The problem is I need people like you to understand that me, Nadine, a lot of journalists who keep phoning me about this are not all lunatics. We haven't lost our marbles. We just happen to know what's going on.
Well, is that the same Nadine Dorries that was the architect of the Online Safety Act? No, thanks.
Well, yeah, she was the person who drafted the Online Safety Act, but that isn't what we're talking about, is it?
Yeah.
I can happily, you know, you want to lambast about the Online Safety Act, fair play, but that wasn't the subject that we're talking about. You've just managed to evade me posing to you. You might not understand what's going on, and you might be deliberately living under a rock right now, Mark.
No, I think you might be deliberately living in your own delusions with reform, to be quite frank with you.
Unfortunately, Mark, I'm going to say bye-bye. Bye-bye. Right, that was fun, wasn't it? I just can't be bothered right now. I'm so sick to death of the general public being gaslit and lied to, and that people who I really wish could have a stakeholder in our democracy, like Mark, have been convinced of something that just isn't true. I've run out of patience with appeasing the horrible people at the heart of all of this with their plots and their factions, because people like Mark deserve to be properly served by proper politics in a proper democracy. And look, I perfectly accept the criticism that Nigel Farage calling an early by-election before the parliamentary watchdog did means he's framed it on his own terms, and people can indeed criticise that. They might think he's trying to mess with the system, shortcut a process. Perhaps other people might look at it and say, well, it was a witch hunt anyway, so why should he sit there, roll over and allow his belly to be tickled? Now, that is up to the the individual voter how they feel about that and how they perceive that particular tactic. What I don't like is when I know that people are being deliberately duped, but deliberately led up the garden path. And I don't care whether this is happening in the Lib Dems or the Greens or the Labour Party or the SNP or Plaid or whomever. I hate people that look at parliamentary democracy as optional, as a game, that faction fighting and coups and conspiracies can run the day, because it is at the detriment of people, good, honest, hard-working people like Mark, who deserve to know that when they put a tick in the box that they're getting what they have voted for. I've run out of patience. I'm just not going to abide it anymore, so I'm sorry. If that means me getting a little bit Ann Widdecombe right now, like I said, I'm channeling my inner Ann today, not that I need much more feistiness, quite frankly. I'm just going to do it. Because if good men and women don't stand up and don't actually say enough is enough, we're condoning it. We're enabling it. And I'm just not going to be that person. Right? I'm proud of this country's democracy. I'm proud that British men and women in their hearts have justice and righteousness and integrity and honesty and pride in our processes. And I do not want to see that destroyed because of some venal, plotting, politicking people who seem to think that power games are more important than your vote and your right to a real democracy. I call time on shenanigans, and I'm not going to apologise for that. Let's do a message. I want Farage to be fully investigated and forced to answer legitimate questions. Fair enough. I also don't care if he's taken 500 million. Never mind 5. That is a trivial consideration when set against the terrible, terrible mess that is 21st century Britain. If he can even make a start on getting our country back, I don't care if he turns out to be Ming the Merciless's rougher cousin. Part of me feels like that, this sort of like, you know, purity competition, the vanity brigade of I'm nice, I'm be kind, oh, Winston Churchill was mean. Just run the blimmin' country and not into the ground, OK? Because we, the people of Britain, need proper leadership. And, you know, right, he should be investigated. Questions are being asked, be investigated. I actually agree with that. I think everybody who's had allegations against them when they hold a senior position in public office deserve to be scrutinised. They deserve to be scrutinised justifiably and fairly. And there may be question marks hanging over whether or not this is lawfare or whether or not there is a real reason to pose these questions. I don't know, and we deserve to know. So I don't mind that. What I do mind, like I said, are the games. And we've seen it before. And there's something about what's going on right now that has a whiff of the playbook. OK, before we go to break, it's World Cup. Big game tomorrow. And we are celebrating here at Talk. And we want to give you the opportunity to win £26,000 completely tax-free. So every last penny will be in your bank account to spend as you like. Here is how to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Don't we live in crazy political times? It's risible. See me getting my Ann Widdecombe out. Risible. The farce that politics has become. They're all playing games. They're all ganging up. They all think they're oh so clever with their plots, their boycotts, their triggering by-elections, and then refusing to partake in other by-elections that have been triggered. I am so done with it, because this leads us to insanity. Many of you know who listen regularly that I've worked around the world in international politics, and lawfare and boycotting of elections has been used in banana republics for a very long time, and I thought we were above that in Britain. I thought that at least we were a nation that had a modicum of self-respect, of duty, of protocol, of actually being rule takers, rule makers, rule followers, rather than people who cynically rewrite the rule book to suit their own ends. But ever since the Brexit referendum, I've come to realise that actually who are we to point the finger at stitched-up elections by tyrants in sub-Saharan Africa? Frankly, these days, we're no better. You know it, and I know it. And for me, the optics around the leader of a political party who's being accused of financial impropriety, calling an election his own constituency, and the establishment going, ha-ha, look at him, he's going to face a man in a giant bin costume, and the way they've all had the bin on Newsnight, the bin doing a photo shoot, appeal to Parliament that bin face can wear a bin on the green benches. This isn't funny. We're about to head into bankruptcy. Putin could invade tomorrow. Lord knows what we're doing about all these marauding prisoners, violent rapists, thugs and murderers who are being let out on the streets early, many of them without ankle tags. Multiple stabbings on a regular basis. Women being sexually attacked and abused by men from foreign climes. Billions of your money wasted on importing the third world, who then rampage around our streets in riots because their football teams don't win. Now is not the time to find it's funny that a man dresses up as a garbage can. And if you're laughing along, and if you think this is all so clever, realise that you're joining the political elite in laughing at you, because that's what they're doing. Oh, let's speak now to the brilliant Isabel Oakeshott, who is, of course, Talk's international editor. Isabel, let's first of all start off. I'm trying to channel a lot of my inner Anne today, because she was never one to milk her words, and I feel that now is the time that we shouldn't either. But let's start off paying tribute to a woman who was of tiny in frame, but utterly mighty in courage and conviction.
Wasn't she? I actually saw her really recently, and I was trying to rack my brains as to what the event was, but it was always a pleasure to see her. And she's in her late 70s, and she just, like, retirement just didn't mean anything to her. That was never going to happen. You know, round and round she went to events all over the country, supporting the political cause she believed in. And she never really got the recognition she deserved. Of course, she should have been in the House of Lords. She should have been Baroness Ann Widdecombe. But because she was a bit of a disruptor and she didn't play by the Tory rules, they never gave her that peerage that she deserved. And I don't know how important that felt to her, whether that was much of a disappointment in her life. Probably not, because she was all about just getting on with it, wasn't she? I mean, have you ever met anyone less self-pitying than Ann Widdecombe? You know, anyone less likely to be playing her own little violin for herself? I mean, she could be a little bit intimidating. I had many encounters with her, because she'd always come to Reform Party conferences, in particular when the party wasn't fashionable. You know, she would always be there, and the members absolutely loved her. And she just, you know, you were showing pictures of her now dating from 2019, but that's exactly how she looked earlier this week. You know, she just didn't really change, did she? No. And that energy from somebody in their late 70s was quite extraordinary. And it was a big shock that she died very suddenly, seemingly yesterday or the day before.
No, it is. And you know, that is such a perfect way of paying tribute. never meeting anyone less self-pitying than Anne. Anne hated the idea of people playing the victim card. She valued strength, she valued conviction, she valued integrity, she valued tenacity, and if it upset people along the way, she didn't care, because she thought everybody needed to have a stronger spine. And it was a generation that we've lost now, you know, in the game of identity politics and be kind and pity me and emoji Burnham now becoming our Prime Minister. It is a great loss. Now let's talk, because, my gosh, have we got a lot to talk about with everything coming thick and fast against Reform UK. The timings of the 5 million when Nigel thought he was coming back. I didn't know I was out of office at the time. I hadn't decided if I was going to be an MP. I took this money for security. Did it lead to sort of fear and favour promoting cryptocurrencies? Then we've got now the ties with George Cottrell, which are historic and everyone knew about, but then these fresh allegations about a donation from his mum being investigated for money laundering. We've had leaks suggesting impropriety from your other half, Richard Tice. It seems relentless. But are there issues here? Can we sort of suggest that there are things that need scrutiny? Is it just simply, oh, well, this is all lawfare? Have things been done in a lackadaisical manner? Is it right that we are hearing about these allegations?
Well, you've asked an awful lot of different questions there. I mean, have things been done in a lackadaisical manner? Not as far as I'm concerned, not as far as Richard's concerned. I'm sure not as far as George Cottrell is concerned. And I'm sure not as far as Nigel is concerned. You know, these are people who have been around politics for a very, very long time and are fully aware of the law around donations and what's permissible and what isn't. So, I mean, I won't go into detail on this. Suffice to say that Richard, my partner, has not been asked anything. No inquiries have been made on his side from the police. He is absolutely certain that there's nothing to see here, and that Mrs. Cottrell, if that's her name, was perfectly entitled to give her money as she pleased, and that was her money. But anyway, I don't think it's probably wise of me to sort of prattle on about that. What I would say is two things. On the one hand, I totally understand, I've said this before, I understand why people are intrigued about Nigel's 5 million. It is intriguing. It's a hell of a story. You know, it's such a huge sum of money. I get why people want to know what's it for, where's it from, all of that. That is just kind of normal and to be expected. What I do think is unbelievable, I mean, I'm genuinely staggered by this, is the operation that is underway to take down Reform's leadership. I mean, guys, it's not going to succeed, okay? You can keep throwing this stuff, you can involve the institutions of the state, you can even go to the highest level, you can have the National Crime Agency meddling in our politics and in our democracy by selectively leaking information and allowing it to be presented by left-wing newspapers in such a way as to create the most harmful impression about the characters involved. You know, this goes to the highest level, but keep doing it, because I think voters see it for what it is. I think that the very many players who are involved in this attempted shakedown have overplayed their hand. This is getting ridiculous now, isn't it? Is it some kind of coincidence that all within the same period of 7 to 10 days, turn by turn, Robert Jenrick, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, who's next, they are trying to take these key figures down? And none of these figures, let me speak for Richard, I don't want to speak for others, he's not in it for himself. You know, Richard was a very successful property guy when I met him, and he could have just carried on being a successful property guy, could have retired to the golf course. He is trying to change the country, and the price that people pay, the price that people like him pay for sticking their necks out, you know, leaving their cozy, easy life of obscurity and actually entering the fight is quite phenomenal. You know, we ask ourselves, why don't we have the kind of politicians we want from the world of business, successful people? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present you the events of the last 10 days. This is why we don't have the politicians we want, because when successful business people enter politics, Nothing is off limit, nothing. And every transaction that they do, you know, is then subject to the possibility that it might be leaked by someone somewhere and some kind of malign imputation put on it. You know, this guy's a money launderer. I mean, anyone who knows Richard, you know, and a lot of our listeners will have encountered him in one form or another, will know that the idea that Richard is some kind of money launderer is truly fatuous. You know, I really, you know, it's just absurd, isn't it, Alex? Have you met anyone that's less likely to do that? And frankly, if we were money launderers, I'd quite like to be seeing a bit of a better return on it.
It is all absurd, and what I find the most distressing is watching the establishment all clamouring to cheer on a dustbin. To me, that just sort of optically, to me, that tells you all you need to know. They don't care. They think that we are ignorant. They think we're stupid. They think they can, you know, rip the proverbial out of us, and we're just going to lie down and take it.
They all think it's so funny, don't they, that Count Binface is running against Nigel. Well, we all know that Count Binface was also the person, or BBC, left-wing BBC guy, that was standing next to Andy Burnham at the Makerfield by-election. On the other side of Andy Burnham was a guy in a fox costume. Behold British politics. Did everyone go round saying, oh, Andy Burnham's fighting a bin, Andy Burnham's arguing with a bin? No, they didn't. What they're doing here, and it's just so transparent, isn't it? They are trying to make a farce of this by-election because it blindsided them. Those idiots didn't see it coming. It was an obvious thing for Nigel to do, given the campaign against him. So they were caught on the hop. They hadn't managed to stitch it up in the way that they were probably planning to, by getting whatever candidates they were all going to agree should represent one side or another. So what are they left with? Well, they're like, well, let's just make a mockery of Nigel. Let's say this is all about Nigel and a rubbish bin.
What does it say about democracy when all the other parties are boycotting it? Isabel, thank you ever so much. It's always a privilege catching up with you. We've got to take a very quick break now. When we come back, we're previewing the brilliant World Cup match that's in store for us tomorrow. That's after this.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me every weekend from 6 a.m. for the stories that matter to you. We talk politics, we talk news, we talk entertainment, we talk about everything that affects your life. There's only one place to start your weekend, the home of common sense. Talk Breakfast on Talk. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every Friday, Saturday and Sunday here on the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'll tell you one thing, as you know, I don't like football, I don't watch football, I don't understand football. And so when we had that late match the other day against Mexico at the Azteca Stadium, I went down to my local pub, and when it was delayed by an hour, I sat there with my eyes beginning to close, and I thought, oh my God, I can't do it. I can't stay up for it as much as I wanted to. And I went home and thought, I'll just stick it on in the background. I'll probably nod off on the sofa. Oh, I didn't. I was gripped. For the first time in my life, I adored every single minute of that match, and I now cannot wait for Saturday. So what is going to happen
happen? Well, I'm not a good authority on this, as we all know. Ryan Bromelo is, because he's a football commentator. Ryan, thanks for coming on the programme. England versus Norway. It's almost like going back to 1066, not 1066, a bit before that. Well, kind of 1066, the Norseman. But here we go. It's apparently few big players up against each other. The one that looks like Vigo from Ghostbusters 2, and people like Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane. How is it all going to pan out?
I'm going to say, I love the references that you're pulling here, Alex. I mean, look, the overall feeling going into the contest from an England perspective is excitement, you know, and they've more than earned the right to feel confident heading into that clash against Norway. You know, you learn more about a team in adversity than you do in comfort, and the Azteca on Monday night, you know, down to 10 men, their legs were drained, their lungs were burning because of the altitude, but he didn't let that chip away at their sense of belief or spirit. And I think they're turning now England into a proper tournament team. It's their third World Cup quarter-final in a row. And with that, gives you a sense of belonging at this stage of the competition. I think from an England perspective, the names that you always look to drag you through a tournament is Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham. Both of them have been superb for England this year, and particularly Jude Bellingham, who seems to, after scoring those two against Mexico on Monday, to have elevated to another stature now.
Does it really come down to some of these big players like Vigo? I can't remember his name.
Vigo.
He's not called Vigo. He just reminds me of the painting of Vigo in Ghostbusters 2. He's
okay.
Haaland, Erland, whatever his name is. You can see I'm a great authority on football. But it seems to me, from my sort of like layman's perspective, that this battle comes down to a battle of big international talent.
Yeah, definitely. And look, Norway will be a pretty different test to the ones that they've faced so far, and that is because of your Ghostbusters character, Erling Haaland. You know, and I think what Norway have is what every manager wants in tournament football, and that's a centre forward that can change the outcome of a match entirely on his own. And you can keep Erling Haaland quiet. You can really keep him silent. And that's been testament over the last 14 competitive matches, because he's scored in each and every one of them. And he's scored 7 out of 4 in this tournament. So he's a tough one to deal with, because he's always on the shoulder of a disaster, Alex. That's the problem. But I think from an England perspective, and we have to flip it through that lens, there's a familiarity there. You know, he plays in the Premier League. He's well known to... He probably is going to come up against one of his teammates in either John Stones at City or Mark Gay, who's got a hamstring strain, so his minutes are being managed at the moment. So there's a chance that it will be a pairing of Stones and Konsa. But look what he did to Gabriel, who, you know, won the Premier League with Arsenal. Look what he did to Marquinhos, who's won back-to-back Champions League with PSG. And Alisson, who's one of the best goalkeepers in the world, in nets for Brazil. He's a tough prospect, and he could get to 80, 85 minutes in a game. If it's still 0-0, he's the guy that you want to turn to from a Norway perspective to take them to their first ever World Cup semi-final.
Fly me. I hope it's as spicy as the Mexico game, because I loved it. So far, this Football World Cup has been thrilling. I've been thoroughly enjoying it. Maybe I'll become a convert. You never know. Ryan, thank you ever so much. What are you doing in the corner there? Messing about with a rucksack, getting out. What have you got on your desk?
Well, listen, there's so
he's got
much
his slap out, his lunchbox.
The problem we have, this used to be the radio, and you could turn up in a pair of jeans and a torn T-shirt. Now we are a global news network, quite often retweeted by Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. So I'm having to brush my hair and apply a little powder onto my rather shiny face.
You've got to get your slap on, don't you, in this digital age?
You always own it every time you're on air here at Talk, and you extra owned it this morning with your